precocious toddler, I'm losing my memories of my past life and my very identity!
Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Dustin Jackson.
And if you're in the Northern Cremasphere, then welcome to Autumn.
Hello, Autumn. How are you?
Please allow DK Vine to be your constant companion as you go apple picking, make leaf pie, ferment acorn cider, and get COVID in a spirit Halloween.
Woo! My favorites.
And
not in that order.
If you're entering spring right now, then please enjoy all of that sticky honey and gooey pollen. Achoo! But also...
Hyle, so, you know those, you've seen us play Mario Party Superstars. You know how you can post, like, stickers while you're playing? Like, you can post a little emote while you're playing?
Yes.
That would be yours. It would be a picture of you, and it would say, achoo, but also...
It makes it just sound like I'm slurping up my own snot.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
that can be your character trait.
The intent was that the pollen's making me sneeze, but also yummy in my tummy. Give me all that sticky insect goo.
Yeah, that's better. That's a better context.
Anyway, it's a new season, no matter where you are on this little sphere, rocketing around the sun. And we've got a bevy. Yes, that's right, a bevy of 20th anniversaries that we'll be covering throughout this back quarter of the year, including a 20th anniversary retrospective on everyone's favorite rare game, Grabbed by the Ghoulies.
Woo!
We've also got spotlight episodes on Mario Kart Double Dash, and, wait for it, anticipation? No, not anticipation. Let the anticipation build. Donkey Kong Country Barrel Maze. That's right.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I almost wet my little pants just at the name.
Everybody got really excited, and then I stuck the dagger in their side. I'm excited about the Barrel Maze spotlight, long overdue, but we are starting this new season of the year honoring an unfortunately overlooked Game Boy Advance title that first came out in September of 2003. It's a game that's near and dear to DK Vine's heart, as well as the hearts of like-minded weirdos who wanted the Banjo-Kazooie series to continue to expand outward, with new styles of gameplay, new perspectives, and new creative minds at the helm, contributing to the grand tapestry that is Banjo-Kazooie. And unfortunately, we didn't really get that all that much. This was the third Banjo-Kazooie game, and it's also weirdly one of the last Banjo-Kazooie games. But we are talking about Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge on this episode.
Yeah, that's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear come out of Hyle's little mouth, out of his little throat.
My little throat that I wish was just covered in insect goo.
Yeah, it really helps these words come out of it.
And also, I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to our unofficial co-host of this episode. She's Freezer. She's in our live stream chat right now. She is probably, and she's quickly ascended to one of the people in our community who I think has become who I think of when I think of these Game Boy Advance titles that Rare created post buyout, or I guess, pre
agree.
buyout, but released post buyout. She's done a number of videos on them on her YouTube channel. I would recommend checking them out, but also just, she's got a genuine enthusiasm for all of them, which is really fantastic to see because, usually I'm the one who has to get excited about this stuff. And it's really nice when anyone out there, not in our immediate sphere, gets excited for us, because it makes my job a whole hell of a lot easier if that enthusiasm is like spread out across the community and across the globe. And unfortunately, not too many people are enthused about Grunty's Revenge, but for those of us who care about it, we are very, very intense.
Yeah, thank you, Freezer, for being a fan of the Game Boy Advance games. I love to see people become fans of these games. It's great when you see like new videos pop up on YouTube that are like, I love this Banjo-Kazooie game, I love this Donkey Kong fella, but it's even greater when they hit the more obscure games, like the Game Boy Advance games, Grabbed by the Ghoulies. That's fun. That's fun to see some love for those.
Well, and at DK Vine, we've always championed these titles, right? Like, we're one of the oddities out there where we're people probably viewed us as just rare, like, loyalist, obsessives, biased, for everything Rare did, or that we were just hipsters, embracing things that other people didn't care about. But we really genuinely love these games when it wasn't cool to love them. And it's always
Believe
nice.
us, we would love for it to be cool to love these games. Yeah. We would love if other people were like, oh yeah, Banjo-Kazooie, Grunty's Revenge, Saberwolf, hell yeah.
But what I think is refreshing about Freezer is, like, she has a real love for them, and it's a relatively recently discovered love for them. It's not just like we hadn't like compared notes up until recently. Like, she discovered them, I think, via DK Vine rambling about them, and it's just nice to see new people stumble upon them, and it like getting a YouTube video in the modern day about them that just doesn't have a thumbnail art of just the host making this exasperated expression, like, like, how dare this game exist? I'm cartoonishly frustrated that it's a thing.
Arms folded, just scowling.
Yeah, or like they've been in a fight or something, like the game beat them up. What is that? What is that? So, anyway, if you enjoy Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge, I want to extend that love and appreciation to you as well, even if I'm not name-dropping you. If you're listening to this and you adore Grunty's Revenge, welcome, my friend. If you have never played it and you're unfamiliar, then brace yourself, because we will be getting into why Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge still matters. And yes, it does matter.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's why I decided to come on, because I do think it matters. I mean, maybe not everyone will see it that way. No, especially since it was left out of Rare Replay, which is unfortunate. But we're here to boost it up a little.
Exactly. I think it's worth boosting. Speaking of boosting, I want to give some plugs to our own bullshit really quickly, Dustin. Now,
okay.
Don't worry. This is actually a thing that doesn't benefit us directly. So it was World Gorilla Day on September 24th. And we have got a special charity t-shirt now available on our merchandise store at dkvine.com/merchandise, or just by searching for us on TeePublic. It's the World Gorilla Day 2023 t-shirt with a design by you, Dustin.
Oh, me? This is news to me. No, I'm very happy with how this shirt came out.
Yeah, and it's like just a day to honor and educate about gorillas, still an endangered species, mind you. And so all of DK Vine's proceeds from this World Gorilla Day 2023 t-shirt we'll be going to the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund, the foremost organization dedicated to the study and preservation of gorillas in their African habitats. You can find out more at gorillafund.org. You can donate directly to them. You don't need to get the t-shirt to donate to them. But
just cut out the middleman. I don't need a shirt.
The t-shirt is lovely. I've got mine on order, and we'll be keeping this on sale year round. This is not something we just have like up for a week to tie into the holiday. This is a thing that you can get at any time you want, and the proceeds will go indefinitely to the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. So check it out on our merchandise store.
Yeah, love it.
All right, Dustin. All right.
Woo.
We only do these Why Blank Still Matters episodes for DKU games that have left a measurable impact in some form or fashion. The Elite, right? We've got
Right.
Diddy Kong Racing. I think that speaks for itself. We have the original Banjo-Kazooie. Ditto. And even though we can debate the final product until we're as blue in the face as an item only Lanky Kong can collect, Donkey Kong 64.
Oh man, I'd be honored if Lanky Kong collected my blue face.
So you might be surprised to see an episode like this on Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge. It's a game that, as I mentioned, we talk about quite a bit on DK Vine. It's held up by DK Viners like Freezer, but is usually ignored by the more casual Banjo-Kazooie fandom. And the casual Banjo-Kazooie fandom can be quite intense in their dedication. But Dustin, you and I were kind of talking about this before we started recording. It feels like there are different degrees to Banjo-Kazooie fandom, and some pockets of Banjo-Kazooie fandom only like the original 2 N64 games, or maybe even just the original game itself.
Yeah, I know a lot. I've seen a lot of people who say anything after the first game, just don't bother me with it.
Right, which seems very limiting. Like, I can understand the debate between Kazooie and Tooie. It's a debate I think you and I are on different sides of, Dustin. Like, we love both games, but we just find where each game excels to appeal to our sensibilities more. Like, I really love Banjo-Kazooie, you really love Banjo-Tooie, but I really like Banjo-Tooie just as you really like Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
you know,
totally.
We see each other's perspectives on it, but yeah, there are some Banjo fans who only like a specific number of games, and it usually excludes the Game Boy Advance games and the permutations thereof, like the mobile versions, which we won't be getting into on this episode. But
we'd be here all day.
yeah, we'll do a spotlight episode one day on Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge Mobile Edition, and of course, Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge Missions. 2 separate spotlights. Of course, we got to do it right. But yeah, these games are also disregarded when it comes to the mainstream gaming media. Like, these are mostly ignored. And it's funny to think about that, because I usually think of Grunty's Revenge as the rare GBA game out of what we call the THQ4. I'll explain more on that in just a bit. But it's the game that gets most of the attention, and it does, but that attention is still scanty. It's still a bit thin.
Scanty. That's a good word.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't help that it's just hard to get your hands on these days. Like I was saying, like, you can't play these in Rare Replay, which is a real shame. And, you know, they're not on Switch Online. They're hard to actually get a hold of.
Yeah, they really are. And I feel like it is one of the biggest omissions from Rare Replay. We just talked about on our most recent episode how weird it is that the Pendragon games, at least one of them, isn't in Rare Replay, considering the importance the character Sir Arthur Pendragon has taken on with Sea of Thieves. And I would say the other big omission, of course, you know, excluding things like Donkey Kong Country, which they couldn't legally include, is the at least one of these GBA games because they meant so much, especially to Rare Fandom, who had been with them through thick and thin through the Nintendo years, and then made the journey with them either on the Xbox platform or stayed behind on Nintendo, but still bought all the games they released on the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo DS during the buyout era. Just, they allowed that transition to Microsoft to be a little bit more graceful because we still got output on a Nintendo platform for several years. I mean, they released them through 2007. So it wasn't just, overnight, okay, Rare is no longer making any games for Nintendo. It was kind of a gradual cool down.
Yeah.
We didn't get anything else on the GameCube after Star Fox Adventures, but we still had quite the little library on the handheld platforms. And I adore most of those games. I mean, let's be honest.
Most of them.
Well, Banjo Pilot is the elephant in the room, and
yeah,
which is weird considering that Taj was only going to be in Donkey Kong Racing, not Diddy Kong Pilot. But more on Banjo Pilot in a bit too, because it does come into this discussion just a little bit. But I would say that this episode is more akin to the Donkey Kong Land episode we did in this format. Because we did a Donkey Kong Land episode, Why Donkey Kong Land Still Matters. And that might be questionable to some younger gamers or just gamers who weren't involved in the fandom at the time. Because Donkey Kong Land was a huge deal when it was initially released in 1995. It even got limited tie-in merchandise. It had the bubble gum, Donkey Kong Land bubble gum. It had the tie-in novel, the kids novel, junior novel.
Right. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that one.
Yeah. So that was during the days of wine and roses for the Donkey Kong Country series, when that was Nintendo's most popular franchise. In the years preceding the N64 and Pokemon, Donkey Kong Country was the biggest shit that Nintendo had to offer. And so, yeah, Donkey Kong Land even got, a lot of love and a lot of shine on it. But Donkey Kong Land has really only fallen down the memory hole in subsequent years. Younger generations who never played Donkey Kong Land haven't really had easy access to it. It was on the eShop, back when that was available, but it really hasn't been widely available since then. And honestly, younger gamers might be turned off because it's a monochrome game that doesn't play as elegantly as Donkey Kong Country. And the general misconception that it's merely a port of that game has kind of taken hold. But Grunty's Revenge was a game that even casual gamers who really liked Banjo-Kazooie probably didn't even know about when it came out. And that's obviously only gotten worse. As you said, it's not been commercially available since release. It's not been in Rare Replay. It's not on NSO. It's just kind of this historical artifact. Like, oh yeah, there was a Banjo-Kazooie game on the Game Boy Advance. So actually there was two. But Grunty's Revenge is the big one.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, just nowhere. Not on Virtual Console ever. It's no re-releases. Yeah.
So, for those who are deeply immersed in this shared universe, whether you're like a Banjo-Kazooie diehard who you've got to play everything, no judgment, or you're a fan of the broader Donkey Kong universe concept, Rare shared universe, Grunty's Revenge is everything. I can't stress this enough how much this game means to weirdos like us.
I mean, it comes up on DK Vine more often than anywhere else, I would say.
Yeah, when promoting this episode, I likened it to the Dead Sea Scrolls, because it is the thing that makes the Banjo-Kazooie series make sense. Which is odd to say because it has the most ludicrous plot of any of the games, but you plug in all the things you learn in Grunty's Revenge and you're like, oh wow, that gives a lot of weight to this bit in Banjo-Kazooie, or oh, that helps me understand what's going on in Banjo-Tooie a little bit more. And I love when games can do that. I feel like Donkey Kong Land did the same thing to Donkey Kong Country. Like Donkey Kong Land really expanded the world that Donkey Kong Country only gave us a small glimpse of. It like widened that keyhole that we were looking through, and then it was like, oh, this is really cool. And I feel like, I mean, Rare's handheld games mean so much to me because they, you know, would individually make me a bigger fan of that property. Donkey Kong Land did it for me for Donkey Kong Country. Grunty's Revenge did it for me for Banjo-Kazooie. Conker's Pocket Tales is a bit of an outlier because that actually was the first Conker game, but I probably wouldn't be as big of a Conker fan as I am if it wasn't for Conker's Pocket Tales. Like you've got
it gives more context to the world, especially since Bad Fur Day, you really don't get much outside of what you see there. So it's nice to have something to go, oh, well, this is what you don't see here.
Yeah, and it's also nice to have that little adventure with Conker before the fall, sort of like,
yeah.
You know, when he's still that heroic, idealistic fella from Diddy Kong Racing versus the cynical drunk from Bad Fur Day. So yeah, I mean, the Rare's handheld games just mean the world to me, and that's a love affair that's continued to this day. I mean, just declaring Saberwolf to be DKU last year really made me reevaluate and rediscover that game. And I'm like, this is a pretty sweet little adventure, Rare. Holy cow.
It's great.
Holy Rare cow.
Yeah. I love that game. I love both these games.
Yeah. So while it's one of those cases where the exact date is argued over by a couple of days, by our own site records, and we've been around now for 24 years, so I will stand by this, Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge was first released in North America on September 15th, 2003. It was the second Rare game for the Game Boy Advance following the remake of Donkey Kong Country earlier that year, but it was the first to be published by THQ. So, I don't know how much you know about this, Dustin, but Rare's prolific Game Boy Advance output. You know, they released 7 games for the Game Boy Advance across its lifespan. However, that almost did not come to pass. They announced...
Oh, I know. I know the whole story.
All right, well, then we'll tell it together. They announced Grunty's Revenge along with Saberwolf, Diddy Kong Pilot, and Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers at the much fabled, much ballyhooed E3 2001. Just the torrent of DKU games announced at that E3 is still unmatched to this day.
Yeah.
However, September 2002, Microsoft purchases Rare. And that put all of these titles for the GBA in question. Obviously, things like Diddy Kong Pilot and Donkey Kong Coconut Crackers had a big, asterisk next to them. But even Grunty's Revenge and Saberwolf, there was a question. Well, they're obviously not going to be able to release anything for the Game Boy Advance now that Microsoft owns them. And even Rare was uncertain at the time because while Microsoft didn't have a problem with them releasing titles for what's ostensibly a competitor's handheld system since they had no handheld on the market, Rare could self-publish games under their deal with Nintendo, like Diddy Kong Racing, Conker's Pocket Tales, Conker's Bad Fur Day, at least in the US. Nintendo granted them, I think, I don't really know the ins and outs, but I know after the massive success of Donkey Kong Country and Killer Instinct, the Stampers were able to negotiate this deal where they could, in addition to have games published by Nintendo, self-published games with the help of Nintendo, sort of these vanity releases where, you know, Rare gets to, for the first time in their history, publish games in their own right, which was a big deal at the time. Ironically, their first self-published game was Diddy Kong Racing, which just confuses people to this day. It was a Rare game, but Nintendo owned the name Diddy Kong Racing and basically licensed them Diddy and Crunch and Banjo at the time, but that's a whole other can of worms. But anyway, so Rare could do that under the deal with Nintendo, but they didn't have that same autonomy as a part of the then Microsoft Studios, now Xbox Studios. So for a while, people at Rare were operating under the assumption that these games would just never see the light of day. And some of them, like Saberwolf, were basically complete. And so they were just sitting on the shelf. And so the handheld team moved on. They were like, well, okay, we got to keep busy. And so if we technically can make games for the Game Boy Advance, we're going to have to do it under the auspices of Nintendo. So the only thing that Nintendo would be interested in would be a remake. So they made Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy Advance, which is why also they did that, you know, so soon after Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy Color. It's because at the time, like, they didn't think they were going to be able to really do anything else. So, well, we might as well do this game. And then if that does well, we'll do the second and so on. But it was THQ who had published Conker's Bad Fur Day in Europe when Nintendo basically just wanted no part in that, even though it'd be Rare doing the self-publishing thing. You know, like I said, Nintendo still had some say in that. They still, I think, gave some financial support for that. So they didn't want to do it in Europe. They're like, this is a foul little monster, this Conker. No, thank you. Because for whatever reason, Nintendo of Europe was more prudish than Nintendo of America, which you wouldn't think that would be the case.
Guessed?
Yeah. Puritanical Americans were like, yeah, give us that pissing squirrel.
Give us that big shit monster.
Achoo. But yeah, THQ, who had, you know, already had this relationship with Rare from a couple years prior, they came to the rescue. So reportedly, though, THQ only wanted the Banjo-Kazooie title, Grunty's Revenge. They had no interest in what Rare's ideas were. Well, they had no interest in Saberwolf, right? Like, what the fuck is Saberwolf? But
yeah, I love Saberwolf, but I can't really blame them. if it's a hard one, it's a tough sell.
And well, I think Rare's idea was, at least once they gave up the goat on Diddy Kong Pilot, because I think they were still kicking around Diddy Kong Pilot. Like, into 2003, like, maybe Nintendo would be interested, and Nintendo just wasn't biting on it. So, they were like, well, okay, of course we're gonna make a Banjo Pilot, right? But, then their idea for Coconut Crackers was, Mr. Pants. And THQ was like, of course, if they didn't want Saberwolf, they definitely didn't want It's Mr. Pants. They just wanted whatever Banjo games Rare could give them. Because Banjo-Kazooie was 2003. It was still pretty well-known IP. You know, it was only 5 years after the original N64 game and only 3 years after Banjo-Tooie. So THQ wanted Banjo, but thankfully the Stampers played hardball and they said, okay, you want Grunty's Revenge, you want Banjo Pilot, you're also going to have to take Saberwolf and It's Mr. Pants. It's all or nothing. And THQ thought, well, it's worth it then if we can get Grunty's Revenge. So that's how the deal was made. Like, Grunty's Revenge, if you want to know why it matters because we wouldn't have had It's Mr. Pants and Saberwolf without Grunty's Revenge. So there you go. That's the episode. Thank you.
Yeah, episode over. Good night.
But that also explains why Grunty's Revenge was the only one to get actual promotion from THQ. Like, THQ did run, like, print ads for Grunty's Revenge. They kind of acknowledged Saberwolf, but
yeah, didn't it at least get, like, a print ad?
it might have somewhere, but It's Mr. Pants was just barely released at all. Like, I think they, like, released maybe 12 copies, allegedly.
Yeah, when I finally got my copy of It's Mr. Pants, not even that long ago, I think it was after Rare Replay even, you could still buy brand new, still in the shrink wrap copies of It's Mr. Pants on Amazon for like $10.
Yeah, I know when we did our MagFest panel, Cameron and I, in early 2000, we talked about It's Mr. Pants. And somebody in the audience pulled out their phone and purchased a copy on the spot. And they were surprised how cheap it was. Like, getting a brand new sealed copy was still so cheap. But,
yeah,
you know, in this age of game collector speculation, like, it's bizarre that you can get a near 20-year-old game still factory sealed for a relatively reasonable price. But they did it. And I think Freezer also got hers relatively recently as well. But yeah, like, it was not the greatest deal that THQ afforded them, but we did get those games. And we wouldn't have gotten those games otherwise. And you can thank Grunty's Revenge for them even seeing the light of day. So, thank you, Grunty's Revenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Grunty's Revenge.
And of course, we will be talking about all of the THQ4 as they celebrate their 20th anniversaries in the next couple of years. But make no mistake, Dustin. Aside from Banjo Pilot, the THQ4 were all absolute bangers. They were fantastic. The handheld team consisted of different individuals working on different games. Like, they didn't just all work on the same games. Like, they don't, like, all share the same credits. But I think all of their output does consist of some similar DNA. And they were just beautifully efficient little games bounding with ideas that I would argue sometimes even outpaced what the bigger teams working on the Xbox and Xbox 360 titles were doing. And I don't mean any shade thrown their way, but these games just, like, punched above their weight limit.
Yeah.
Even Banjo Pilot, the only one of the four I would actually consider mediocre, that was basically a case of their hands being tied because they came up with a fucking fantastic solution for Banjo Pilot. They created the voxel version of Banjo Pilot, which was a technical marvel. It was just unbelievable. We've talked about it recently here on the Kongversation, just what they were able to achieve on the GBA. And the only reason that didn't see release, like, there were a lot of stories at the time, it just couldn't run. Like, ultimately it wasn't feasible. No, it could run. It was just that, I think it was Tim Stamper, might have been Chris Stamper. I get them confused all the time. One of them lives in a Dracula castle. And anyway, one of the Stampers said, due to the inability to have link cable support for multiplayer, they really wanted that feature. And so they scrapped.
I don't know.
They scrapped.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't know anyone who's ever played Banjo Pilot multiplayer.
Exactly. Like, that's just not a thing. I would rather have an absolutely mind-melting single-player racing experience on the GBA than a mediocre, almost pointless experience that if I ever found somebody who had a cartridge, I could link up my GBA with them and play a really uninspiring round of racing. It's just no contest. The Stampers in a lot of ways were brilliant visionaries, and I owe so much to them. I mean, they founded and shepherded the studio that means more to me than any other video game studio on the planet. But they could also be wrong too.
Yeah.
and this is one of the reasons, like, they're not infallible, but they did more good than bad. It just, this was one of their biggest misfires. It was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Not everybody's right 100% of the time. To be perfectly fair to Banjo Pilot, though, to be, like, totally perfectly fair, it's not good. or it's not great, we'll say.
Yeah.
It's fine. But to be fair, I feel like that's my opinion on almost every Game Boy Advance kart racer. Like, I think it's really hard to do a good one on there. If there's a really good kart racer on Game Boy Advance, I have not played it.
I think you can see that with Super Circuit, which has really shown its
Exactly.
age. But like the voxel version of Banjo Pilot would have at least been just really fun to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I say all that because the handheld team were just really deft at taking the hardware limitations, and they were able to just do wonders with it. And that's a hallmark of Rare, really, of any era, right? Just taking the hardware and saying, okay, how can we make the most mind-blowing game possible with this? And even in their one misfire, they still did it. It was just politics kept it from actually seeing the light of day.
Too bad.
But we're not here to lament the loss of the Banjo Pilot that we wanted to play. We're here to talk about Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge. And I want to talk about the brilliance of the story. The conceit of the story, because it took them a while to land on how to do a Banjo-Kazooie game that wasn't like part of the Greg Mayles lineage, that was its own thing, but still like complemented what the Mayles Sutherland team was doing with Kazooie and Tooie. And eventually they settled upon a drop-in midquel that's actually a stealth prequel.
Yeah, it was pretty weird. It feels like the decision to make it an actual, like an in-between quel came pretty late.
Yeah, so like it could have just been a terrible idea. Like dropping a whole unmentioned until now adventure between Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie when Banjo-Tooie gives no indication that anything of this nature happened between the two games. Like the escalating continuity of Banjo-Kazooie to Banjo-Tooie separated with the story and world expansion from another team at Rare entirely. Like, it sounds like a terrible idea that could have just wrecked the canon of Banjo-Kazooie. But not only does it work, it somehow, to me, makes both Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie all the richer for it.
I agree. I totally agree.
And that's no easy task. It's like, you know, painting over a Da Vinci or you know, what was that art restoration in, was it Spain where there was that like fresco of Jesus that somebody tried to restore and made him look like a monkey man?
Oh my God, I forgot about that. That hurts. That is hilarious, but also hurts to think about.
Yeah, so it could have been that, but it wasn't. And I think it took them a while to figure out how to do this elegantly. And they tried because, like you said, this plot evolved numerous times in Grunty's Revenge development, because Grunty's Revenge actually started development all the way back in 1999. The year Donkey Kong 64 was in development, while Banjo-Tooie was still in development. That's crazy. They started Grunty's Revenge on the Game Boy Color when it was originally called Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Curse. And, you know, we could get in the ins and outs of Grunty's Curse and how it differs from Grunty's Revenge, but I would like to read the story to Grunty's Curse just to kind of set the stage on how they eventually took it to Grunty's Revenge.
I would love nothing more than to hear you say that with that mouth.
I will. My non-pollinated mouth right now, because it's autumn here and not spring. So this is the document for what they called Banjo-Kazooie GBC. It's from August 10th, 1999, 12 days before DK Vine launched. They wrote up this nonsense. So, this is like, from the design document packets that were released online several years ago. What's the story? Recreate the end of Banjo, referring to Banjo-Kazooie, in a scene or in text conversation. A few years have passed and the calm of a holiday on a farm was just what Banjo, Kazooie, Bottles, and Mumbo needed as they reflect on their battle with the wicked hag Gruntilda. Tootie is away having an adventure of her own elsewhere. Kazooie wondered how much Gruntilda was enjoying herself under the rock. I don't think old Warty Whiskers is having this much fun. As our friends relax, things are afoot on Spiral Mountain.
Oh, you know how much I love feet.
Klungo has returned from the lair in the Flying Cauldron. What the fuck is the Flying Cauldron? And he's got something to save Grunty. Klungo drops the metal Mecha Grunty from the Flying Cauldron. Aha! Take on me. No. Aha! Shouts Grunty, and her ghost leaves the pit under the rock and seeps into the metal monster. The camera moves to a close-up on the metal Grunty as its eyes flash to life, and Grunty cackles with delight. Thank you, Klungo. I was tired of eating worms.
Man, she's not even trying to rhyme in this one.
she even forgot the quotation marks there. She's just...
Man, I'll cut her some slack. She's been under a rock.
I know. Dwayne Johnson is a passionate lover. The scene changes back to our friends relaxing at the farm. A shadow looms over them, and they feel a chill. Looking like a twisted device of torture, it's the metal Mecha Grunty.
Oh no.
Oh no. Grunty freezes the group to the spot and greets them with a curse. Beating me, it was a first. Your just reward will be my curse.
There she goes.
It's kind of a rhyme, not really a rhyme.
Yeah, a slant rhyme.
Yeah.
She's getting there.
She's getting the worms out of her mouth. That's what's happening here.
She's spitting them out.
Her rhymes are improving. The less wiggling little fellas are in her hole.
Yeah, her worm meter is slowly going down.
Mumbo, since you helped this pair, the worst of luck will be your share. There she goes. Bottles is transformed into a funny creature as opposed to... and is unable to help Banjo.
Yeah, what was he before?
Yeah. Your wormy breath I know too well. What? Everybody's got worms in their mouth in this one. It's the latest fad of 1999, Dustin.
Everybody was eating the worm that year.
Cram your gullet with your ground friends. Okay, your wormy breath I know too well. I'll give you 4 eyes with this spell. I guess she literally gave him 4 eyes rather than the lingo of somebody wearing glasses being 4 eyes.
That seems like a weird curse. That sounds like she's helping him.
Yeah, I'm actually making your nickname literal here.
You're going to be able to see twice as well now.
Grunty hypnotizes Kazooie and changes her into her new partner. Kazooie, come to Grunty's roost. To be my wings, you'll need a boost. Banjo will be forced to fight his friend if he is to save Bottles. Stupid bear, to save your friend, you'll have to fight us to the end.
Man, he really has to save Bottles. His plight sounds so awful.
Mumbo breaks loose from Mecha Grunty's gaze and chases after her as she and the monster Kazooie make their exit. Mumbo tries in vain to stop them, but with every step he takes, his luck gets worse. Okay, they forgot a comma in there, and I didn't understand how.
Their grade is not gonna be very high on this one.
No, I want to take a red pen to this.
See me after class.
Out of thin air, his bad luck rains down on him. First, a black cat covers his face. Then, blinded, he runs straight under a ladder. And as the cat jumps away, a mirror lands on him and lays him out in the broken glass. This sounds like a farce at this point.
I was gonna say, wow, Gruntilda went all in on the slapstick here.
Mumbo gets up with a bandage on his head. He can't remember his spells. Oopsie doodles.
Oh,
no. All he knows is Banjo will have to find a few magic ingredients to return Bottles to normal. In the years since they first fought, Banjo has forgotten all of his moves. How will we learn them again with Bottles in his condition? Banjo will have to find Bottles' old man. He may be as blind as a bat, but the old curmudgeon taught Bottles everything he knew. At the end of the game, Banjo catches up with Grunty again back at Spiral Mountain. They have their big face-off, and the improved Mecha Grunty is destroyed. As the others rejoice, Grunty's ghost sinks back into the hole under the rock, only this time her body is turned to pile of bones. The end?
Pile of bones?
Question mark. So, I also like how they just basically yada the whole game. And then the game happens, and then the end.
Yeah, eventually, you get it. Eventually he wins.
We'll figure it out. We'll make it up as we go along. But you can see though, even though they probably didn't even really know what Banjo-Tooie was going to entail, they tried to make some room for what the Banjo-Tooie team were doing there by basically saying, oh, okay, and then Grunty's a skeleton at the end, and I guess Banjo-Tooie can happen after this.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's no time travel involved. It sounds, would this game have just been a Banjo solo game? I wonder.
Sounds like it.
I wonder if it would have been like Grunty's Revenge, where you save Kazooie. It sounds like the point is Kazooie has been turned into Gruntilda's partner.
Yeah.
That's a concept that can carry its own game.
Yeah, you have to fight a monster Kazooie. It's similar to like when you have to fight Amber in Grab by the Ghoulies. She's been ghoulified, and you have to get a cure for her. And there's little like threads of stuff that would wind up in the final Grunty's Revenge, but also stuff that reminds me of later Rare games as well. But
you know what my favorite part of that story was?
What's that?
So it's. So Kazooie gets taken by Gruntilda, turned into her partner, turned into a monster Kazooie. But in this little bit of story, it says, Banjo has to save poor Bottles. Yeah. Kazooie's just a bonus, I guess, but we can't... This franchise is over if Bottles is a little four-eyed creature.
Meanwhile, the Banjo-Tooie team were snickering because they were just going to straight up kill him at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, they're like laughing, oh yeah, you better make sure Bottles is okay.
And I think this version was going to be more of a 2D like platformer.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't...
I wish we could have seen it.
I mean, we've seen some sprites, we've seen some artwork online. I think this is interesting, but I don't really lament losing this version of the game just because
definitely
I adore what we actually got. And this is a case where, sometimes leaving something in the oven to cook a little bit longer is beneficial to the final product.
Yeah.
It's not like the Diddy Kong Pilot situation where it just goes back and forth so much that eventually they just want to be done with it. Like, this actually aged like a finer wine. Yeah. Because production halted on the Game Boy Color version, like, relatively soon after. Like, they didn't get that far with this. And Banjo-Tooie, of course, did come out first. However, when Nintendo revealed the Game Boy Advance, Rare was like, we gotta get in on this. And they got back to work on Grunty's Curse, reformulating it as what became Grunty's Revenge. And because Tooie was already out at the time, they hit upon a different angle to make it work. Instead of it being something that takes place before, since Tooie was already out, they didn't want to pull that card because they thought it might be confusing. So they thought, what if Grunty's Revenge... They thought that might be confusing. So they thought, what if Grunty's Revenge is a parallel timeline in which Grunty's sisters never came to rescue her, causing the events to play out differently?
Yeah, I mean, that really worked out for Zelda. Everyone loves that.
Yeah, this is basically the Marvel what if scenario. Like, oh, okay, but what if Mingella and Blobelda just had something better to do? What then? Like, what would be the story of Banjo-Tooie then? Which, is interesting, but when we get so few Banjo-Kazooie games as is, I don't need to start exploring the multiverse of possibilities when I really just want to catch up with, Banjo Prime, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it would have been a huge shame. Then people would have a reason to just not ever play Grunty's Revenge.
Right, because it's not canon to the main timeline. I mean, we were interested by the notion at DK Vine, but I think it was kind of cushioned because of just the sheer litany of DKU games we got announced at that show. Like, we had Donkey Kong Racing, so whatever. Oh, parallel universe, Banjo-Kazooie, sure. What? Just add it to the list. Sure. Whatever.
Yeah, you guys didn't know that you weren't going to get that many Banjo-Kazooie games.
Right. Because we thought we were still going to get, Banjo-Kazooie on the GameCube. Like, we thought, like, the future was just made in the shade. Like, we didn't...
Yeah, move over, Mario.
We didn't know that the turmoil of the buyout era lay ahead. So it was just kind of fun and like having all of these different angles that the DKU was taking. But eventually they hit upon a more elegant middle ground that I think works best.
Yeah.
Because enough time had passed since Tooie came out by the time Grunty's Revenge actually, had a chance of seeing release, that they didn't really have to worry about players getting confused with the chronology. It had been, when Grunty's Revenge was released, it had almost been 3 years in real time since Tooie came out. So who the hell cares?
Right.
So they could just make it a firm midquel, and they could then make sure things are put back exactly into place for Banjo-Tooie to still have happened exactly as we remembered, with only one or two minor hiccups, like continuity things that make you think like, well, wait, does that really work? It's minor, but there are a couple things in there that are a little bit questionable, but...
A little squelchy?
Yeah. But, you can see it where they pared down some things from Grunty's Curse. Like, they did separate Banjo and Kazooie, but you get Kazooie back in the second world, Breagle Beach, and then she's with Banjo for the rest of the game, which is still bold, I think, to basically take Kazooie away from Banjo for the entire first world. Like, that's interesting storytelling in a Banjo-Kazooie game.
Yeah, I guess I would have been fine either way. I feel like if you had Gruntilda kidnap Kazooie and she's just gone for the whole game, that's an interesting angle to do. But also just something like this, I don't mind this. I like having Kazooie for most of the game.
Yeah, like, I like solo Banjo. Let me rephrase that. I like solo Banjo in principle. In execution, it's kind of a slog. But... yeah. It harkens back to Diddy Kong Racing before his partnership with Kazooie began, but I do prefer the pair as a pair, Yeah,
it at least gives some stakes.
Yeah, it does. Now, we should explain to the layperson what the actual plot of Grunty's Revenge ended up being. And I want you to do that, Dustin, just on the spot. I didn't prepare any notes on this because I want to hear it from you. I want to have somebody describe to me what the plot of Grunty's Revenge actually is.
Okay, well, it's not that much different from Grunty's Curse. It's a little.
It's a little, because they added time travel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little different in that the entire concept of the game is different. Yeah, so it's 2 months after the first game.
Yeah, that's also important. It's only 2 months. Like, we talk about it being a midquel as if it was this halfway mark. It only takes place 2 months after Banjo-Kazooie, so, like, it's, like, late August 1998.
Right, yeah. Same sort of beginning. Klungo comes in with the Mecha Grunty. Grunty casts a spell to put her ghost inside of the robot. She kidnaps Kazooie. She doesn't do anything to Mumbo. There's no bad luck or anything like that. Bottles is not even here. He's not even a presence in this. So Mumbo sends you back in time. Is that how it goes? Am I remembering that right?
Yes.
Mumbo
so
uses his magic to send you back after?
Mumbo apparently just happens to know a time travel spell, which you think would be a dangerous thing to, like, dangerous arcane knowledge. But Gruntilda also knows time travel. So...
Right, fight fire with fire. It's like, well, this is the only way you're gonna stop this.
You would think this would lead to some sort of, like, massive time war in the DKU that would just render the entire fabric of space-time irrelevant and just lead to the end of all things. But thankfully, they just realized maybe we shouldn't time travel anymore, and they stopped after this.
Yeah, even Gruntilda was like, you know what? That was kind of messed up. Maybe I shouldn't, like, do this.
It's also worth pointing out that the way time travel is portrayed via the spell, it seems to be a case where you could theoretically change the past. Like, this isn't one of those things where you're creating a branch timeline, or it's the whatever happened philosophy where you do time travel, but that time travel has always been accounted for in the history.
Yeah, it's just always been part of part of this timeline.
Which, for the record, like the Smash Brothers form of time travel with the, of course, Chest of Time, I think that is a whatever happened form of time travel, where this is very much, we could potentially change history time travel. Now, whether or not that's just branching the characters into a separate timeline and they don't realize it, I don't know. But I think the implied logic that Rare is presenting is they can change history with this very, like, dangerous spell that's probably forbidden.
Right. Yeah. So, Gruntilda kidnaps Kazooie. Mumbo sends Banjo back in time. He meets up with Bazai. Bottles... is he his grandfather, or is he just referred to as, like, relative?
I think he's just referred to as relative. So in Grunty's Curse, he's referred to as Bottle's old man. But in true Cranky Kong fashion, they made it far more ambiguous in the final product. He's either his grandfather or some great uncle. We're never really clear how Bazai relates to Bottles. But yeah, Bottles doesn't appear at all in Grunty's Revenge. It's just Bazai, this old man who lives back in 1978.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. If you're gonna have Bazai teach you your moves, what do you even need a Bottles sprite for? But yeah, then you go through your little worlds, you save Kazooie at Breagle Beach, do your little Banjo-Kazooie song and dance, until you eventually make your way to Gruntilda, stop her, save the day, she goes back under the rock, to wait for Mingella and Blobelda, and then they all have a good time. Is that right? That's how it went, right?
That's basically it, yeah. Now, I do have some questions. My one criticism of this plot is that the time travel is kind of pointless.
Yeah, you don't need time travel. None of these locations are, like, set to the time period. They could just be locations in this world.
So there are a couple instances where you meet past versions of characters. I think only one big one, but like, I feel like they came up with the time travel element, and maybe I'm way off base here, but I feel like they came up with it for a big reason is then you can portray Spiral Mountain vastly differently than it is in Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. Right. If you say it's 20 years in the past, then it can basically be whatever you want it to be, and it doesn't impact the N64 games at all.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest reason they went down this route. Now, the plot doesn't really make much sense because you think, okay, Grunty's going to go back in time and she's going to make it so Banjo and Kazooie never meet. But that doesn't really come up. There's this whole thing where she's enslaved Breegles. And that might be like, if I can like get the Breegle population under control, Kazooie's never born. But then you've already kidnapped Kazooie, so I don't know.
Yeah, what's the point of kidnapping Kazooie in the present?
I guess to make it harder for Banjo to then save Kazooie in the past, both literally save her in the past and save her very existence. But yeah, it's a little like they lose the plot pretty quickly. Even it's not a great work of literature, let's just say, but it does allow for some fun set pieces, and like I said, it does this great little balancing act where, yes, it is in the chronology for Banjo and Kazooie and Grunty, it's a midquel, but it's effectively a Banjo-Kazooie prequel in the world of Spiral Mountain, because we get a glimpse of what Spiral Mountain in the year 1978 entailed, and that helps us better understand the struggles of the characters in the late 90s and early aughts.
Right.
And so I think that is, like, I'm never going to say, oh, they shouldn't have time traveled, because so much of the lore and the joy that lore hounds can derive from this game is all thanks to that conceit. So
yeah, I mean, I like seeing some of these younger versions of characters. I think it's still fun.
Yeah. I wish, like, just like in Banjo-Tooie, I wish, like, the plot would have come up a little bit more. Like, Grunty's got this life force sucking machine in Banjo-Tooie, but then after, like, the very early parts of the game, it's just forgotten about until the very end. I wish the threat of her, like, altering the past came into play a lot more than it does. Like, they basically give up after the second world, and then it just becomes a standard romp, a standard Banjo-Kazooie romp just in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can only do so much with, like if it constantly cut back to Gruntilda being like, yep, it's still charging up.
Well, yeah, I think they could have utilized it as a set piece in Tooie a little bit more, and in this game, she could have, like, threatened to, I don't know, like, slit Chimpy Kong's throat.
Jesus
Christ. No. That, like, maybe Chimpy's father or something. Like,
yeah, that should have been the plot of the game. I'm gonna go back in time and make it so Chimpy Kong was never born.
And then you'll never get your third Jiggy.
Your third one. No.
or maybe your second.
Just put an end.
Know. Yeah.
Just put an end to that adventure real fast.
So that's the plot, basically. It's a midquel, that's a prequel. Grunty's Revenge was credited to the following names at Rare. And these are just the ones that had official credits in the game itself. Now, some of these names will be familiar to listeners of the Kongversation, and some of them may not. It's not often that I can easily read an entire team that made a game rather quickly, because it's a small bunch of people. So I'm just going to do it because I feel like people deserve credit.
Yeah.
So Dermot Fanning, Ryan Furchow, Pete Hentz, Desmond Hinkson, Gavin Hood, which sounds like if Gavin Price, like, robbed from the rich and gave to the poor, he would be Gavin Hood. Jamie Hughes, Chris Pigas, Paul Rom,
Gigas.
and Ryan Stevenson. Now, when I acknowledged Grunty's Revenge turned 20 the other week, Jamie Hughes actually quote tweeted me on Blue Sky. Get that Blue Sky invite from your friends. This is what he had to say. The first game I worked on at Rare. Having never worked on a game before, I wrongly assumed there would be a team of audio people on the project. I managed to somehow put some semblance of a soundtrack together.
I like it. I like the soundtrack for that game.
It's a great soundtrack. I was so happy when Rare turned 35. They did this digital compilation from their entire history. And they would typically do one song per game, maybe two songs. Grunty's Revenge got in there, and it was really great to hear that. I think it was Spiller's Harbor was the song they picked for it. But yeah,
great pick too. I love that music.
It's not often we get to hear Banjo-Kazooie music sans Grant Kirkhope. So yeah. I thought Jamie Hughes did a great job with this. It's,
agreed.
Just a really fun, in the spirit of Banjo-Kazooie. It kind of reminds me of the Donkey Kong Land soundtrack, the original songs from Donkey Kong Land, how they did their own thing, but it was still evocative of Donkey Kong music. So
yeah, it was still very fitting.
Yeah. Now, we also have special thanks. We had the Stampers, Simon Farmer, Greg Males, and Paul Makachek all getting special thanks. And I don't know how much they individually contributed to the game. I know Paul Makachek's fingerprints are all over the handheld team, and I know Greg Males probably they probably solicited him for ideas, and he probably gave them. I mean, he's the big idea man at Rare at all times, even for games in which he's not properly credited. So I wouldn't be surprised if Greg Males said, "Oh, you should do this and you should do that," and they were like, "Thanks, Greg."
Thank you.
So I don't think their influence can be dismissed outright. And among those on the testing side, friend of DK Vine, Chris Alcock, and
what up, Chris?
What up? And the inspiration behind Conker's Pocket Tales Forest Wong, David Wong. So some big names there on the QA side. Dustin, what I love about Grunty's Revenge, though, beyond the plot, which is ludicrous, beyond the fan service, beyond the lore, beyond all the little jokes that they've put in.
Don't worry, it gets even better than a time travel plot that doesn't quite come together.
What I love about it is how it somehow perfectly recreates Banjo-Kazooie's structure as a top-down experience.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think this would be able to work as well as it does. Now, Grunty's Revenge is often compared to Conker's Pocket Tales, but Pocket Tales uses that top-down style to basically do a riff on traditional Zelda games. And don't worry, I'm not equating Pocket Tales to any Zelda game. Please don't, yell at me in the comments.
How dare you?
I somehow doubt Pocket Tales was trying to emulate what 12 Tales was going to be. And I do like Pocket Tales for what it is, but I recognize Pocket Tales is, sort of a flawed, messy game.
Right.
But it's a flawed game that means quite a lot to me. But Grunty's Revenge somehow recreates the experience of a 3D platformer, and a 3D platformer we all know really well, in this top-down style. It has to do things differently for sure, but it's able to do it in a way that, for my money, really does feel like you're playing a Banjo-Kazooie game proper.
Yeah, totally. I think it's pretty commendable, the job they did to make it just feel like a Banjo-Kazooie game.
They didn't cut any corners. You got musical notes, you've got Jinjos, you've got Jiggies, you've got Mumbo transformations, you even got bosses, which is something the original Banjo-Kazooie didn't really have a lot of, but here in each world you got a boss fight, and I I just really, really like how it does feel like a proper handheld counterpart to Banjo-Kazooie, which in 1998, I wouldn't have thought that to be possible. Not in the same way like Donkey Kong Land is a handheld counterpart to Donkey Kong Country. That makes sense because you're just able to translate the 2D gameplay on a smaller scale. Here, they're able to pull off something that you, like, feasibly wouldn't have been possible until the Nintendo DS, at the very least. But they're able to do it in a completely different format that still feels like you're playing the real deal. And I love it.
I feel like not every game is successful in doing that either. Like Freezer points out in the chat, the Spyro ones, I heard those were pretty good, but they just never like felt the same. Banjo, they did a great job of translating it over to the Game Boy Advance. I would never have thought they would be able to. I look at something like Crash Bandicoot, where those Game Boy Advance Crash Bandicoot games are good, but they are not really the same as the console Crashes, because they're not 3D. They're just side scrollers, which is fine. It works. It's evocative of the Crash games, but it's obviously different. Banjo, it's crazy they were able to do this.
That's why Grunty's Curse, I don't mourn it that much, because that's basically what it would have been. And I'm sure it would have been neat to have a 2D Banjo-Kazooie, but I don't really need a 2D Banjo-Kazooie. And maybe that's hypocritical of me because I want 3D Donkey Kong and 2D Donkey Kong. But I think because Banjo-Kazooie was born of the 3D platformer world, I don't need to necessarily, like, go down a peg with it.
Yeah. I'd still be curious to see, like, if it somehow ended up being, like, a game they actually did get pretty far with. I know it's not, but, like, if just one day out of the blue we saw, oh, here's Gruntilda's Curse, 99% finished before scrapped, I'd still be super interested in seeing how they were planning on doing it. Like, translating Banjo from a 3D game to a 2D side-scroller, that is crazy to think about. But at the end of the day, it is a good call that we got what we got.
Considering we've gotten so few Banjo-Kazooie games over the years, like, if Banjo-Kazooie was this big, robust, even on the level of Crash Bandicoot, right? Or Spyro, if we were getting regular games, then sure, a dalliance with 2D platforming might be a fun little thing. But since we have only gotten a handful of Banjo-Kazooie games, I'm glad this is the big handheld adventure we got.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, what I really love about it, just beyond the structure, just beyond how they were able to recreate the magic in a different format, is that it is, as I said, the Dead Sea Scroll to Banjo-Kazooie and to this whole corner of the DKU. Because you get a Spiral Mountain history lesson. And I didn't realize until I played Grunty's Revenge how much I needed this. Because, let me explain. In the three big franchises of the DKU, which are Donkey Kong, Banjo-Kazooie, and Conquer, the classical three, right. The history of Donkey Kong Island, along with, like, all of the territory that the Kremlins used to claim as their own, the Kremlantis Empire, Crocodile Isle, the Northern Kremisphere, the history of that has been explored, at the very least, through the contextual storytelling seen in the games. Like, they've never done this big history deep dive game for Donkey Kong, but you get a story told to you in background details and dialogue. Like, much of it is rooted in the backstory of the Kremlins, but it was further fleshed out even when Retro took over the reins for a few years, and we got, like, the Tiki Tak tribe and a little bit more into the history of Donkey Kong Island. I feel like I have a good grasp on what the history entails there. And Conker's Bad Fur Day also spun an absurdly detailed history for the Panther Kingdom, going into the Milk Wars and all of that nonsense. I mean, it's a farce, but it's still a history nonetheless. And, that the Panther Kingdom is the area of Willow Woods in which all Conquer games since Bad Fur Day have taken place. All of them. Live and Reloaded and Conquer's Big Reunion and Young Conquer, all of them.
Yeah.
But we never really knew much about Spiral Mountain itself, or how it connects to the broader struggle between Banjo and Kazooie and their allies and the Winky Bunyan family. And that's what Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge did. By having us arbitrarily time travel to 1978, we saw a Spiral Mountain in the throes of change, going from a classical Spiral Mountain we never knew to the Spiral Mountain we would come to know in 1998 in Banjo-Kazooie. And this includes a completely different layout. Like I said, them doing this time travel thing really allowed them to show a Spiral Mountain that was not necessarily consistent with the N64 games. It allowed them to just basically make their own Spiral Mountain and say, well, this is the way it was in 1978 before Gruntilda landscaped it. But this
can you believe there used to be a farm here?
Well, there are world portals that are accessed outside of the mountain layer, just like there are portals to these realms in Grunty's lair, as opposed to, Banjo-Tooie and the Isle of Hags, that's just the Isle of Hags, right? You just go to Hailfire Peaks or Pterodactyl Land, and it's just part of the island. These are a little bit more nebulous. Some people will argue, no, Gobi's Valley is actually, just outside of Grunty's lair, while some will argue they are portals to these, pocket dimensions or something. But they utilize the portal style with Grunty's Revenge, and we've got portals outside of the mountain. So we've got Cliff Farm, we've got Breagle Beach, we've got Bad Magic Bayou, love that name, Spiller's Harbor, and Freezing Furnace. And the big, shocking revelation in Grunty's Revenge is that Spiral Mountain used to be the home to the Jinjos.
Oh my goodness.
But before the home we visit in Banjo-Tooie, the Jinjos claim Spiral Mountain as their home valley. In fact, King Jingling held court in the mountain before Gruntilda kicked him and them out and made it her lair. And there's this, Rare's so good at layering all this backstory just into art direction.
Environmental storytelling.
Yes. And if you're, observant enough, I don't want to say clever enough. I was about to say clever enough, and I was like, maybe that's giving me too much credit, us too much credit. Say, we're so clever, we understand the intricacies of Banjo-Kazooie lore. But it is environmental storytelling. Dustin, one of the great moments of my career as a Donkey Kong journalist was meeting Pete Hentz for the first time at E3 2015 and striking up a conversation about Grunty's Revenge with him. And you could tell nobody has ever approached this lovely man about his work on Grunty's Revenge up until this moment in his life. And his face actually lit up. I get to talk about Grunty's Revenge with a stranger. What is happening here? And just talking to him about all the little decisions he made, like putting a lava lamp in Mumbo's house to signify that it was the late 70s. It was great, but there are just so many great details in this. And Ryan Stevenson also worked on Grunty's Revenge. It was I don't know who's responsible for the giant King Jingling head that Gruntilda is knocked off the mountainside to replace with her own head, but it is just this amazing detail. It's covered in kudzu. So it's clearly been up there for a long time. and it's just been displaced. And you can, like, jump on it and walk around, and it, like, King Jingling is never brought up in this game except for this little detail.
Yeah, I love it, and they don't need to beat you over the head with it. They don't need to have a character come out and say, yes, this used to be the home of King Jingling, and blah, blah, blah. It's just something for you to find and appreciate.
I like that Rare trust its fans to put these details together.
Yeah.
It really does make me, like, it's why I've always felt seen by Rare, even, like, before DK Vine, when I was just, like, trying to piece together the errant lore of Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong Racing. And by the way, there are a lot of, like, political machinations over giant mountain heads in the DKU. Have you noticed this? I
have not noticed.
Well, Gruntilda, like, replaces King Jingling's head on Grunty's lair. Wizpig.
There's the Wizpig and Taj.
Wizpig and Taj go back and forth. K. Rool blows the Donkey Kong face off Donkey Kong Island.
That's true.
There's a lot of it going on. So, yeah, I think this adds some serious pathos to the Jinjos that maybe didn't exist before or wasn't earned before. Because in Banjo-Kazooie, in the instruction manual, I think it's explained that Gruntilda is targeting the Jinjos just because they're, like, cute or, like, they're carefree, they're peace-loving or something, and she doesn't like it because she's evil. And
they're, like, peace-loving or something.
But here it becomes the story of they were the indigenous population of Spiral Mountain, and she comes in and makes it her lair and forces them out.
Get these colorful freaks out of here.
Yeah, so it adds some kind of, like, historical weight to it, like pulling from the shame of human history into this colorful cartoon world, and makes you hate Gruntilda a little bit more.
Yeah. I like that. They have that big Jinjo Oracle.
Yeah, we'll get into
That's fun.
We'll get into her in a little bit here.
I'm jumping the gun.
Hold on.
I'm just so excited about Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge.
I know it's about time travel, but don't get ahead of me. Also, you know who else used to call Spiral Mountain their home?
Oh my goodness, who used to do that?
Not anybody, but the biggest cult leader in the DKU. I'm talking about Master Jiggy Wiggy and the Temple of Jiggy Wiggy.
Oh my god, everyone's favorite character.
Yeah. His temple used to be in Spiral Mountain as well before Gruntilda presumably drove him out. And it makes sense because both the Jinjos and Jiggy Wiggy sort of wound up being relative neighbors to each other, on the Isle of Hags. So it makes sense that they, like, made this exodus together after Gruntilda took control in Spiral Mountain and just became too much of an overbearing presence.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. I don't know what I was going to say was interesting. I don't think these guys are that interesting. I like them in Tui, but, they just kind of serve the same purpose in this game.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that he did incorporate Master Jiggy Wiggy into this when you don't really need him. But
yeah.
It's an interesting set piece nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely. I like that they're there rather than just having something boring for the Jiggies. Like,
yeah.
I like the Jiggy paintings in 1, but if they just did that here, I would be a little disappointed.
It's also harder to do.
I like having a context.
It's also harder to do Jiggy paintings probably out in the open elements versus Gruntilda's hallways.
Yeah, exactly.
And yes, Honeybee, Banjo-Tooie character Honeybee, she who makes the honey. She used to live in Spiral Mountain too, weirdly enough.
Who I would never have guessed that because I wouldn't have thought to.
Right, and like who would have thought that Honeybee was like an adult woman in 1978, like 22 years before you meet her in Banjo-Tooie. Like, she's older than she looks in Banjo-Tooie.
Yeah, she ages gracefully.
She is, yeah. It's all the honey. It's all the stickiness. It keeps your skin moisturized.
Yeah, I think most bees... What's the average lifespan for a bee?
I don't look this stuff up because it depresses me, because then every time I see a bee, I'm going to be sad.
You do not have much time left, little fella.
I like to imagine that whatever magic is imbued in Honeybee that makes her, a tall, lanky bee person, it also makes her age far longer than the average honeybee. Yeah,
it gives her immortality.
Well, not immortality.
Hey, we don't know that.
I hope
she could be immortal.
I hope she dies someday.
Wow, yeah, I guess so too.
And yes, as we said, Gruntilda began her operations in Spiral Mountain in 1978, 20 years before Banjo-Kazooie, reconfiguring the Jinjo mountainside into her lair. It's not complete yet, but it's under construction. And
yeah,
the biggest and most blatant, perhaps inelegant, retcon to existing Banjo-Kazooie lore at the time was that Grunty's Revenge reinterprets the relationship between Gruntilda and Mumbo Jumbo. So instead of Gruntilda being Mumbo's pupil who betrayed him when she went to the dark side, as Banjo-Kazooie, the instruction manual tells us, Mumbo is presented in Grunty's Revenge as a novice shaman who's just starting out and isn't that great at the spells and what have you. And in my mind, this can be reconciled a couple different ways. Perhaps Mumbo still tried to train Gruntilda in his youthful hubris, and that ended poorly for him. Or maybe instead of what Banjo-Kazooie made us believe, perhaps Mumbo and Gruntilda shared the same teacher, and Gruntilda then betrayed the both of them, still disfiguring Mumbo's face in the process. I don't know.
I could buy that.
There's some relationship still between them, but our understanding of Mumbo was that, he was already experienced at the magic when Gruntilda found him, and Grunty's Revenge shows, well, that's plainly not the case.
Yeah.
So, Grunty's Revenge, as we already established, has quite a few returning characters from Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. Although, is it a returning character from Banjo-Tooie if this game takes place before Banjo-Tooie?
Yeah, or is this a debut appearance?
Right, a retcon debut. But Gruntilda, her name is in the subtitles, so we got to talk about Gruntilda. Just like Banjo-Tooie introduces a skeletal Gruntilda, Grunty's Revenge gives us Mecha Grunty, which is probably the most unique take on Gruntilda in all of these games.
I was going to say, it's quite a departure. It still looks enough like Gruntilda that you buy it, but yeah. I mean, 2 is basically the same appearance except she's bones. This one is pretty different. She's got all that, metal on her. And,
right,
and
well,
buttons and knobs.
It's her soul in a robot body, which I love that little detail. Which that detail was there from Grunty's Curse. They really like that idea, but yeah, it's the most stark makeover for Gruntilda. And when you look at the DKU baddies who do change and alter their appearance or persona from game to game, like your K. Rool, like your Gruntilda, like your Capital B, I think Mecha Grunty is far and away the most just complete rethinking of what she looks like. But she still looks like Gruntilda. It's Gruntilda in a robot body. This would be a great Banjo Pilot Tour variant if we were ever to get that mobile game.
Oh, definitely. I wish. It's got to happen someday.
What's interesting about the render is that this might be an artifact of the alternate reality plot. The render has her robot body marked Hag 1.
Yeah.
And, of course, the Hag 1 was the digger module that her sisters came to rescue her in. Now, this has some design nods to the digger module in that her witch's hat is actually a big drill.
Yeah, I love that drill hat.
So I don't know if in the final game, if it's supposed to be like the Hag 1 or like this becomes the digger module that the Hag 1 is. Like they take the robot Grunty body and build it into the digger that shows up in Banjo-Tooie, or if we're just not supposed to see the Hag 1 at all, and like it doesn't exist in the final game, and this is just a render that is an artifact of that plot. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, with the graphics on Game Boy Advance, there's no way you could even tell that it would say Hag 1.
And this render is also the best render Grunty's Revenge has to offer.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it only goes downhill from here.
You can tell this was,
I love them.
You can tell this was made earlier than the others because it's of a higher quality.
Yeah, I mean, look at those feet.
She's got little robot toes.
I didn't even think about that before.
She's got little robot like nails, like sharp little sticky nails that are like jutting out. It's a great little touch.
Yeah, what's to be gained from that? Why does Klungo give her those robot toes? It's just because, well, it's got to have feet, and feet got toes.
Got to have sex appeal.
Yeah, you know, we want this Grunty to be appealing to people.
When I look at a robot witch, I have to ask, am I going to get aroused?
Yeah, a little something for daddy.
Once we check that box, then we can move on to this less important details.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also love, you don't see it too often. You actually see it more than you would think, but it's Gruntilda's ghost design. It appears like in the beginning when she transplants her spirit, she astral projects her own soul out of her body that's trapped under the boulder into the robot shell. But then when Banjo and Kazooie are fighting Mecha Grunty throughout the game, they will occasionally knock her soul out of it and can attack her soul. And I just love the design of this. It's basically like a purple spirit with a little like ghost tail.
Yeah, I love that her spirit is already a skeleton.
Yes, yeah, it shows how fast she was decomposing underneath that rock.
Yeah, she's already done. It's been 2 months.
2 months without food. Like, she's able to preserve herself using magic, you know, but yeah, she's basically like biologically dead at this point.
Yeah.
Gruntilda's a great design. Mecha Grunty is a great design. Klungo, who's in this game, I don't know what they were thinking with this Klungo redesign. I don't understand what the handheld team was doing with Klungo.
Yeah, I mean, let's be totally fair. Yeah. In the game, he does look good. His sprite in the game looks a lot better than this render does.
What happened, Dustin? What happened?
Look at those toes. Ew.
I mean, I'm glad he has toes. I'm always glad they have toes. Yeah. But
I don't know what my favorite part is. The toes, the gigantic wall eyes, or how his arm is clipping through his jacket on the right.
What I don't really like the direction they took Klungo post Banjo-Tooie, and this includes nuts and bolts. I don't like that they made him look more inhuman than before. Like they it was always a little bit ambiguous what Klungo was supposed to be. If he was just like a witchy, warlocky human, like the Winky Bunions, like he just had green skin. They like made him look more like an ogre or a troll man, like blah, 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 blah.
See, Hyle, I think this is where we're gonna have differing opinions. I always thought he'd just look like a ogre troll man.
See, I just thought he was just a regular guy with green skin who liked to leave his lab coat open and let it all hang out.
Yeah, you know, who can blame him when you look that good?
Also, Klungo had hair in Kazooie and 2.
I always forget he had hair.
And here they just didn't bother. They said, no, he's a little goblin monster.
To be fair, you really can't see anything behind those gigantic eyes.
Like you said, in the game, the sprite looks fine.
Yeah.
But this render, like, aside from the toes, because, you know, stick them worms in my mouth,
obviously,
I don't like this Klungo design. It's also worth pointing out though that this is only past Klungo that you fight in Grunty's Revenge. Like present Klungo shows up, 1998 Klungo shows up, but the Klungo you interact with most in Grunty's Revenge is the Klungo from 1978.
Yeah, I do always forget that.
Klungo himself does not time travel, which is interesting. I wonder what 1978 Klungo is thinking, considering it's 1998 Gruntilda who's running around in a robot body. Klungo's like, wait, what's happening? I'm trying to make a monster army for 1978 Gruntilda, and now you're showing up 20 years from the future saying you're going to be a robot. Like, should we just change plans right now? Because it's obviously not going so hot.
Yeah, from the looks of it, it was not successful the first time.
So Freezer in the live stream says he was always an ogre. Sorry, Hyle.
He was always an ogre.
You know, I think we're just shaming ugly men all of a sudden. Oh, he was... sorry, he was always an ogre. I was like, he might just have green skin and be a little paunchy. Oh, his ears jut out a little bit?
He might just have that big overbite.
Yeah. He's got two big teeth sticking out, and he's got slightly pointy ears. I don't think that makes an ogre.
An ogre that does not make. To be fair, he does look more ogreish than ever here.
He does.
Look at his feet and legs. I know we were already looking at his feet, but really look at them. His legs, feet, and toes are just made up of a bunch of green orbs.
Yeah. I mean, he spends most of his time hanging out in a swamp in this game, so, like, maybe it's just, like, pond scum. He just needs a shower. He'll shower and he'll look like Fabio.
I want that to be in the next game.
So, we talked about Bozai a little bit, but it's worth just discussing his character design just for a moment. Because, talking about wonky eyes, no dungarees this time, but...
Yeah, he doesn't quite earn a song.
You know the whole Bottles family, you know, the joke is they're nearsighted because they're moles. But Bozai, they take it to the next level in that he has a lazy eye. And it's just like, they make jokes about it as they do, you know. Kazooie is less than tactful when it comes to, you know, less than perfect physical appearances. She's shallow that way. But, you know,
if someone has any flaws, she will be there to point it out.
Which, you know, had she been turned into a monster, maybe that would have showed her some humility.
Yeah, I guess now I see what it's like being Bozai the mole.
You're not so hot, are you little breagle? So, the Jinjo Oracle is the big Jinjo presence in this game. And, like, there are Jinjos as, like, collectibles, but, like, King Jingling doesn't appear, the Jinjonator doesn't appear. The Jinjo Oracle is kind of the stand-in there, and she appears in every world. To make this easy, she's a giant statue that I guess her soul possesses.
I guess so.
Yeah. Yeah, she's like already deceased, like long ago, but she is just this ancient fountain of wisdom for the Jinjos. And whatever happened to the Jinjo Oracle, because it's to be assumed that all of these Jinjo Oracle statues were like torn down, at least in Spiral Mountain. Like maybe they still exist in Breagle Beach somewhere, you just can't access it easily. But
yeah, they kind of thought about the Jinjo Oracle's past deeds and decided it wasn't great to keep the statues up anymore.
The Jinjo Oracle isn't much of a character, but it's just a little like neat conceit. It's a little nice, colorful world building to have another individualistic Jinjo who might have meant a great deal to the Jinjo culture of decades past.
Right.
Just little bit of world building color there. The Jinjo Oracle is a lot better of a character, though, than our next one. How do
boy.
I... So, in the DK Vine gallery, the caption to this, I believe Matt wrote this one. The caption to this says, AKA Mr. Not O Racist O Namo. Which is a joke, because it's totally a racist name. The name itself is not a slur, so I will say the name. Mr. Ripovsky. Now, he's a mouse who is portrayed as somebody of Romani descent. So fill in the blanks what he looks like. I think had Grunty's Revenge come out like 2 years after this, they would have said, hey, maybe we shouldn't. It's very much of the time, and early DK Vine, I can't say we were any better, so I'm not going to fault Rare for this. They got better. They learned their lessons. I very much doubt we will ever see Mr. Ripovsky again, although he has appeared more than once. He would show up in Banjo Pilot in the background as well.
That's true.
As well as, I believe Grunty's Revenge. If he's not in the mobile edition, he's definitely in Missions, probably. But,
I will say, at the very least, I love that they do show off, they do get to have the Grunty's Revenge characters return in Pilot.
Yes.
Overall, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. It is nice. No, it's not nice. I guess it's a relief as an American to see, a racism in one of these games that's not our fault for once. You know what I mean? Like this is more of a distinctly European faux pas rather than all the garbage that Rare learned from us, our country. So that's
bad influences.
That's a relief. This one is not the fault of our ancestors. So, no, but
thank God.
This little mouse, he's running all sorts of scams in several of the worlds. Banjo has to, he's basically, let's say he's kind of like Swanky Kong, if Swanky Kong changed up his MO from world to world. Just hosts, like he hosts different mini games and he has different like side hustles going on. Like in general, I would like the character if he didn't have those connotations.
Right. Yeah.
'Cause he could be a fun character if, he didn't suck so much. Down to his bones. But,
right down to those mouse bones.
Yeah. So, there are also, like Mumbo's in it, Honeybee's in it. They're pretty much as is. Jiggy Wiggy's in it. Like, they're pretty much as is from, previous appearances. Mumbo is portrayed as a little bit younger, and he's got a 70s pad. Like, it's not Mumbo's skull, it's Mumbo's pad in this game. And he's got, like, the animal skin carpets and lava lamp, and a disco ball comes down. And he's portrayed as a little...
Simon Says pad?
Yeah, he's portrayed as a little bit... Yeah, that's right. But he's portrayed as a little bit hornier.
It was the 70s.
It was the 70s. People had chest hair and gold medallions, and they fucked a lot.
Man, you know what? You can't tell due to the Game Boy Advance hardware. Maybe Mumbo does just have a lot of chest hair.
It would have been a great touch if instead of his like grass skirt, he just had like grass on his chest.
That would be great.
Like going down to his pubic region.
Yeah, he's actually nude.
I said that would be great, and I'll stand by it because I've made my bed.
Yeah, you gotta now. I'm right there with you. I think it would be a great idea, in quotes.
Also, I should just point out right now, the key art for this episode, if you're listening to us on YouTube or SoundCloud, shows the end to Grunty's Revenge. And canonically, it's implied that Mumbo and Honeybee hook up at the end of Grunty's Revenge.
Good for them.
You know, yeah, like, if you ever wondered, like, if you're ever hosting a bar trivia night and you say, what Banjo-Tooie characters were later to reveal to be casual lovers 2 years before the game took place? Cause they hook up in 1998, like not even in the 70s. Like after the events of the adventure, they're just like, all right, well, I guess we'll fuck now.
Yeah, and Mumbo's hut is decked out like it was back in the 70s. He was trying to recapture some of that mad sexual glory.
Yeah. He was like, I've got to find my mojo, baby.
I've lost my mojo.
And then he finds it, and he makes glorious love. He copulates with the bee lady.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's just... I bet he was stung horrifically after the fact.
Yeah, it was just like a one-time thing. They both decided, you know what? I don't think this is actually going to work.
Yeah, it was a one-night stand just for sheer practicality reasons.
Well, they gave it a try at least.
They did. You know what? It's not about the love that lasts. It's about how the love we find transforms us along the way.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say about it.
Of course, this does create a huge internal inconsistency. This is what I was alluding to earlier. Honeybee shows up in Banjo-Tooie as effectively a new character who Banjo and Kazooie don't know. Even though...
They forgot.
Well, even though, like, it would be one thing if they ran into her in 1978 and she doesn't remember them. But to Banjo and Kazooie, you know, in the chronology of their own experiences, it happened to them 2 years ago, and Honeybee showed up outside of Banjo's house in late August 1998. So they should know each other pretty well.
Yeah, maybe it's just some time travel amnesia.
or maybe, like, you know, she just reintroduces herself, like, here's what I'm gonna do for you, and, or, you know, maybe they just met her that one time in 1998 and they weren't that well acquainted. And then after like their initial introductions or reintroductions, they were like, oh yeah, we met before.
Forgot about that.
So you kind of have to squint a little bit when it comes to Honeybee's presence in Grunty's Revenge. But otherwise, I think it holds up okay-ish.
Yeah, it doesn't, other than that,
like
it doesn't really mess with anything.
Master Jiggy Wiggy as well, but I think to a lesser extent, because Master Jiggy Wiggy is just a mysterious weirdo as is.
Yeah, you know what? He's the Master Jiggy Wiggy. He probably meets lots of people. He probably doesn't remember this barren bird he met back in the 70s. That's right. How many bears and birds do you think he talks to every day? Hundreds.
It is the rare archipelago, so probably, honestly, quite a bit.
Exactly.
Speaking of Mumbo, though, and moving away from the topic of his vigorous sex life in Grunty's Revenge, he's got 4 transformations in this game. Unique transformations. They don't recycle any of this garbage from Kazooie or Tooie. And, like, it's presented as Mumbo's magic is weaker here. He's not that great of a shaman yet. So the transformations kind of suck in comparison to Kazooie and Tooie. But I like them. I think these are fun, and they get the job done of like communicating the thrill of transforming Banjo into these creatures.
I mean, these transformations, I mean, they suck compared to what? A walrus that can't do anything?
Honestly, the
pumpkin?
octopus is much better than the walrus.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, these at least all have functions, and you can use any of them in any world. That's a big plus.
Yeah. You actually have a radial. You can just choose which one you want to be. It's pretty great. Like, I would say the candle is the stupidest one, but because
look at that thing.
One of the greatest accomplishments DK Vine pulled off, like back in the olden days, was asking Lee Loveday, "Hey, do you have a huge high res render of Candle Banjo from Grunty's Revenge?" And he just sent it to us and said, "Here you go."
Just what you
needed.
So
we have an absurdly large version of Candle Banjo and not the others.
Just that one.
Which, honestly, I would...
Look, it has little candle arms.
I know. Honestly, I would rather have Mouse Banjo, Octopus Banjo, or Tank Banjo.
Literally any of the other ones.
But we got Candle Banjo because we thought it'd be funnier.
Yeah, I mean, look at his little candle arms. I've never noticed that before.
Yeah,
I guess he needs him to hold that backpack on.
Yeah, it wouldn't really work without it, you know. But he's all drippy. Like, it's the drippiest Banjo by far.
Well, so far.
So far. I'm holding out hope. We will get a Banjo that is even messier in the future. But right now... Right now.
Just wait until the next Banjo game. He's going to be so drippy.
As of September 25th, 2023, the drippiest Banjo on record is Candle Banjo from off of Grunty's Revenge.
There we go.
I love the little teeth coming out of Mouse Banjo, though.
Yeah, same.
Like, I wouldn't mind him gnawing on me a little bit.
Chewing on your earlobe a little.
Freezer says a tank is way cooler than a Whittle Pumpkin.
I mean, it's hard to argue.
But
Tank Banjo.
I think
what a good one.
I think Octopus Banjo is also great. Hey, here's another little thing you might not have noticed about Octopus Banjo. Do you notice his shorts have holes for every tentacle?
Yeah.
So I never thought that Mumbo changes the alchemy of his clothes, but I guess he has to on occasion.
Yeah, I mean, even in Banjo-Tooie, I guess that's Humbawamba, but you get stuff like the TNT plunger, the snowball. You know, the clothes just gotta change with them.
It's not really something you think about until you've got octopus tentacles coming into play.
That's a lot more legs than normal.
Yeah. I really do like the transformations. I very much doubt we will ever see first four figure statues of any of these, but...
I was just about to bring up, give me a first four figures statue of Octopus Banjo.
You know what?
Or Candle Banjo.
Yeah, how about Yankee Candle? Shit or get off the pot and give us just Candle Banjo.
Yeah, hey, you know what? If you need the reference, we got a pretty high quality picture of it.
We're who you come to, rare licensees. You know what? Just have Adam Park get you in touch with us and we'll take care of it for you.
We'll make it happen.
So yeah, the worlds of Grunty's Revenge. Now, they're kind of packed with a lot of little lore details, all except for Cliff Farms, which is pretty basic. I think Cliff Farms is clearly a holdover from Grunty's Curse. You know, there's the whole bit in that plot where they were like vacationing at a farm, this nondescript farm. Like, why are they going to a farm? Whose farm is this? So I think Cliff Farms just kind of held on from all the different versions of the game. But, you know, considering the rural themes of Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo in particular, it is surprising that we've never really gotten a proper, like, farm area until Cliff Farms.
Yeah, you'd think it would be a a pretty obvious level trope. Maybe they didn't do it because it's just not that interesting a level.
I think a farm could be quite interesting, Dustin.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you do it. And I do like that they did it.
Do you remember Conker's Bad Fur Day? They were farming the cheese.
That's true. I do love the farm. That's one of my favorite levels in Bad Fur Day. They made a farm interesting. Although, is it a farm or is it just the barn?
Well, I think a barn, necessitates the notion of a farm. If you have a barn, you have a farm.
Right. I guess they are growing cheese.
They're raising cheese as livestock in the nightmare world of the Rare Archipelago when you have googly eyes that can attach to things and bring them to life.
You know what? I never thought of it in that context. Now I love it even more.
Marvin ate so much he blew up, but don't worry, he stitched himself back together.
Yeah, who could forget?
Yeah. So Cliff Farms, it doesn't really, we don't know who's running Cliff Farms. Maybe it's Redneck Kong. Wouldn't that be great?
It probably is.
Had the original intent of the THQ4 come to pass on a Nintendo, and we got Diddy Kong Pilot, the original Diddy Kong Pilot, alongside Grunty's Revenge, maybe that would have been a little connectivity, a little thread between the two. Here's Redneck Kong and Diddy Kong Pilot. Now he's going back to his farm, and you can visit him in Grunty's Revenge.
Yeah, a little brand synergy there.
Or I guess it would have been an alternate timeline Redneck Kong, though. So,
oh, that's true.
A Redneck Kong who never went Diddy Kong piloting.
Yeah, don't worry, he's dead now.
We've got two different types of animal critters living at Cliff Farms. We've got the little bleeders, which are sheep. And we've got the cluckers, which are chickens. And, of course, we've got Mama Clucker.
Of course, who could forget?
Mama Clucker. I
just
hope,
look at her.
Dustin, yeah, so for those of you listening, I provided Dustin with character artwork for all these characters that we're discussing. These are all courtesy, by the way, of the DK Vine gallery. Once again, Matt Corna... What he did was he took the in-game sprites for these characters and he polished them up into render form. So for all the characters who did not get official renders from Grunty's Revenge, like Mama Clucker, Matt Corna said this will not do. And he made unofficial renders, which the Banjo-Kazooie wiki cannot differentiate, and they use all the same. So, yeah, Mama Clucker, basically a render. Basically, as close as you're going to get to an official render for Mama Clucker. It's all thanks to Matt.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
we lie to you at DK Vine. You're welcome.
That's our favorite part.
Yeah. We tell you lies and you enjoy it because you don't know any different.
Yeah, you slurp those lies right up.
Just like it's some gooey pollen from a friendly insect. No, where Grunty's Revenge really starts coming alive, it is the second world, and not just because you get Kazooie back. It's Breagle Beach, and oh my god, Dustin, the lore of Breagle Beach. So, Breagle Beach seems to be this spiritual pilgrimage site of the Breagle birds. And of course,
right.
Look, we only really knew Kazooie. She's a red-crested Breagle. I guess you could make the argument that the birds the characters carry in Banjo-Tooie multiplayer might be other forms of Breagles, but
I would think so.
It's never really explored all that much. But here, in addition to red-crested Breagles, of course, we now learn about pink Breagles and white-colored Breagles that are referred to as ancient Breagles. So the Jinjo Oracle specifically says, the ancient Breagles must be too old for Grunty to put to work in her slave quarry.
Jesus,
yeah. So yeah, what Gruntilda is doing in Breagle Beach, 1998 Mecha Grunty is doing. Although maybe No, I don't think 1978 Gruntilda had any part of the quarry in Breagle Beach. I know that she was using the quarry in Breagle Beach for materials for Grunty's lair, but I think she was just like intervening in the construction of Grunty's lair to enslave the Breagles visiting Breagle Beach in the hopes that it would disrupt the timeline and Kazooie's own parentage. That's just me extrapolating, though. This is never really delved into all that much in Grunty's Revenge. But yeah. You've got like your talking about environmental storytelling and all the like context where it puts in. You've got like this whole beach that's this place that the Breagles basically migrate to, and you've got like Breagle statues, and it's just it's really cool to get that glimpse for like Kazooie's people, because so much of Banjo-Kazooie the series seems to be rooted in Banjo first and foremost, and Kazooie, probably because of the way her character evolved during development, is kind of an afterthought. So for the team,
she's just kind of along for the ride,
right? So for the team to come along, the Grunty's Revenge team to come along and say, what if we did a little bit more with the Breagles and kind of flesh that out just a little bit? That's really cool to see.
Yeah, totally. I love that. I love seeing these Breagles. It's not even something I really asked about in Kazooie. Like, when we just had Kazooie, and that was good enough for me, but I like seeing all these other Breagles. I think it makes sense to have them around.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, really outside of this, the only other Breagles we've arguably seen aren't even referred to as Breagles for legal reasons. Like, I think Stu in Donkey Kong Country Returns is supposed to be, at the very least, evoke Kazooie. Whether or not you can make the argument that he's some former Breagle, you know, that's another debate to be had. And Kablooey in Yooka-Laylee and Yooka-Laylee Impossible Lair, I think, is supposed to be a Breagle, but of course Playtonic can't come out and say that, can they? So
a little mini baby Breagle?
Little baby Breagle. No.
Yeah, it reminds me of Yoshi, how he starts out as just like this little gumdrop.
I know, and you just want to chew him?
Yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page here.
You don't even want to swallow him, you just want to chew him up and see what he looks like when you spit him out.
Yeah, I just want to see what he looks like on the inside.
Do you know what my favorite character, though, in Breagle Beach is?
I think I have an idea, Hyle.
Yeah, I recently did, so on the various Twitter clones that have sprung up since, you know, the muskification of Twitter, I do this feature called Obscure Character Monday, where I take a character from the DKU that isn't well known outside of our circles, and I do a little write-up on them. I
love that.
I show any artwork we have of the character and a screenshot of the character where applicable. And I recently did one on this character. Doesn't have an official name, because this is one of those that Rare never really gave a name, and so DK Vine likes to comment and say, well, you gotta have a name for this character. Character has to have a name. And This was, again, Matt. Matt has done so much heavy lifting for Grunty's Revenge after the fact. Named him Cap'n Skeleton.
I love it. I just, for those who can't see it, Cap'n Skeleton, no O in that name. Cap'n Skeleton.
Yeah, which is just quintessential Matt humor.
Yeah, he's a real apostrophe guy.
But what makes Captain Skeleton even funnier, besides his made-up name, is his design. And this is one of those things where if you're not really paying attention playing your GBA, you would never notice it. The amount of people we've pointed this out to, and they've been blown away. Our friend Courtney, I think, is the most recent one to be bewildered by the actual character design of Captain Skeleton. Captain Skeleton is a ghost pirate who actually a ghost skelly pirate who is a giant skull with a glowing red eye and one of his other eyes covered with an eye patch. He's got a red bandana, and he's got little tube arms and legs attached to the skull.
Yeah, you know what? You better change what you just said, because I think Dustin is the most recent one who's bewildered at this design.
You never noticed this either?
I never noticed this in a million years. I would not have noticed this. His little dinky body. I love it.
Yeah, it's not even a body. He's got little arms and little legs, which I guess they're bones.
They look like matches.
Well, yeah, I think they're supposed to be bones, sort of like, a Jolly Roger, skull and crossbones. Right. But actually made into an actual character. And yeah, they're just attached to his chin. like imagine a wacky inflatable tube guy at the car dealership, except he sucked.
Except if he sucked, yeah. If instead of like really long wiggly arms, he just had little matchsticks.
What I appreciate about the Cap and Skeleton fight, he's a fight you have in Brickle Beach. Banjo and Kazooie walk out to the pier or dock or whatever, and it's in the it's like the shooty like a shooty mini game where you're using Kazooie to shoot eggs at Cap and Skeleton. Cap and Skeleton is a great example of accidental DKU continuity after the fact. So, Rare in no way designed this boss battle thinking, if we one day make a whole game about pirates, we should really foreshadow how the ghost ship battles are going to work. They weren't thinking in those terms, but lo and behold, Dustin, the Cap and Skeleton boss fight is pretty much exactly how ghost ship battles work in Sea of Thieves.
Pretty much. I mean, there are some big differences. You do not fire at them with eggs from a bird, but overall the concept is the same.
Here's the thing, Dustin. If you had access to a bird that shot eggs in Sea of Thieves, this would be nigh identical.
Exactly.
Exactly
the same.
Exactly.
That took me a few times of you saying it.
It took you 20 years to know that Cap and Skeleton had little tube arms and legs.
Yeah, lots of revelations tonight.
So ghost ships, generally, there's only so many ways you can portray them, and a very popular way to portray them is as green apparitions, green specters. But this is so close to the way Sea of Thieves does it that when they added ghost ship battles to the game, like, I went back to Grunty's Revenge and I was like, holy shit. And this is what I love about the DKU, because Rare never planned any of this crap out. But because they only have so many ideas, it just all syncs up so beautifully. And, so you fight Cap and Skeleton. By the way, Cap and Skeleton is a ghost. He is a ghost skelly, which can be a thing. And, what I love about it is he haunts this, like, section off the coast of Brickle Beach. Then you can swim down into his actual shipwreck. So you fight his ghost ship. Then you can swim down into his shipwreck later on. And sure enough, there is a portrait of Cap and Skeleton as I was going to say flesh and bone skeleton, but I guess just as a bone skeleton because there's no flesh. But it's Cap and Skeleton when he was a living, well, no, not living, more living than he was up above the surface when he was a reanimated corpse versus just the specter of a reanimated corpse. Anyway.
Yeah, he's more physical here.
It gets very confusing, but I love that you actually visit his physical ship where presumably his physical remains are interned.
Yeah. Yeah, he gives a little more to him, to this skull that you probably wouldn't even think twice about normally.
And this is why I say that Sea of Thieves feels like the payoff of so much stuff Rare set up, going back to the Sir Arthur Pendragon games, but like in the more modern sense, since 1994, since Donkey Kong Country first had a damn galleon sail into the map screen. It's just little stuff like this that have really accumulated. If you've been paying attention to all of these games, then Sea of Thieves will just feel like the natural, not end goal, but just the natural, like, master statement on all the pirate chicanery nonsense that goes on in rare games. So you talked about past versions of characters, Dustin, and, you know,
Right.
Mumbo being a 70s Burt Reynolds Lothario, cool. Honeybee is basically the same, like Master Jiggy Wiggy. There's fundamentally little difference between them. The biggest, the starkest, I am visiting a younger version of a Banjo character in Grunty's Revenge is Blubber. Captain Blubber shows up in Breagle Beach, but he's a kid. He's
a little kid.
He's Little Blubber, and he's got a club called Little Blubber's Pirate Scouts.
Yeah, how many of his pirate scouts do you think are still alive by the time you meet him in Kazooie?
I think it's kind of like My Friends, where they lost interest in my interest, and they like so the way I view Little Blubber's Pirate Scouts is like the DKU. Little Blubber was really dedicated to being a pirate, and he's the only one who stuck to it. All of his other friends like had kids and like got desk jobs somewhere.
Yeah, we're gonna like play a sport instead.
Little Blubber kept true to his childhood ambitions, and he became a Donkey Kong a pirate captain.
Smooth.
I really love the design of Lil Blubber.
Yeah, same.
You know,
look at that little guy.
We're used to seeing like baby versions of iconic video game characters, but I never liked the design of them. I'm talking about Baby Mario, Baby Luigi, Baby Peach, Baby Rosalina.
Right.
'Cause you're just taking, like, in a lot of cases, this middle-aged man and making them look like a middle-aged baby. Like, you're just like, all right, well, let's get the mustache off of him and just make him small. But
I guess.
I mean, let's put him in a diaper. Let's put him in a diaper, you know?
Yeah, we're not monsters.
But Lil Blubber, he feels like the child version of the Banjo-Kazooie character, and he's cute. He's a cute version of Blubber.
Yeah.
I love him.
Look at his little teeth.
And I love him. He's like, you know, hey, Bear, do you want to join Little Blubber's Pirate Scouts? He's so enthusiastic, he just wants more recruits. I don't know. This is the kind of shit that warms my heart, Dustin, because I'm not a monster. I'm not made of stone. I'm not the Jinjo Oracle. I'm a soft touch. And so when I see even a character who is just as inconsequential in the grand scheme of things as Captain Blubber, and I know Captain Blubber is more consequential than most of the characters we obsess over on DK Vine. Like, I know Captain Blubber means a lot more to Rare Shared Universe than Captain Skeleton, because Captain Blubber has a real name and he doesn't have little tube arms. But, like, he's still kind of small potatoes in the grand scheme of things. But I just love that we got this little backstory of him, that he wanted to be a pirate even back then.
Yeah, I love it. I love this little guy.
Yeah. So Breagle Beach is a fun world.
Yeah, I just always like beach levels, even if we've like already done a beach level in Banjo before.
Well,
like,
yeah.
I still like it. I still like being there.
Well, and I think that's also an important distinction to make is, you know, Treasure Trove Cove is such an iconic environment in Banjo-Kazooie. To do another beach environment takes hubris. It's like, but the fact that they did it and they were able to say something different with it. They didn't just repeat the same tropes. Like, here's Snacker, he's gonna get you again, but in the past, so it's the first time. Blah.
It's a little baby Snacker.
Yeah, maybe Snacker grew because he took a bite out of a time traveling banjo. And that's where he first developed the taste for bear meat.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that was the world we lived in, but not the case. But I do like that we at least get little blubber. I like that we get something.
Now, Freezer earlier pointed out that in Banjo Pilot, Breagle Beach does appear, but they reuse the background of Treasure Trove Cove, and we're going to have to explain that when we eventually do the Spotlight episode for Banjo Pilot.
Ooh, shit, you're right.
We will, but not today. Not today.
For another day.
Bad Magic Bayou, Dustin. Bad Magic Bayou also has some knockout lore.
Okay.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was hoping you would pick up on that because you'd be so excited that you would just jump in and finish my sentence for me.
Oh, I would never do that because I don't want to.
Are you not as enthused about Bad Magic Bayou as I am?
No, I like Bad Magic Bayou. I actually love swamp levels. I know, Hyle, you're not a big fan, if I remember right. Is that correct?
Okay, so my thing about swamp levels, Dustin, and this is nuanced, and I'm sorry if I didn't give the impression that this was more nuanced than that. Sometimes I get very grumpy, and I'm just like, I hate swamp levels. Yeah,
I hate all swamp levels.
But in all actuality, I do like a good swamp level. But the problem is, I think it's hard to do a good swamp level because so many swamp levels have this pitfall of looking visually non-distinct. You got too many similar hues going on. Oh, here's just a bunch of green. It just muck. Bleh. It looks like pea soup.
Right.
I think you can do a good swamp level, but it's a challenge. I think what really like broke me for swamp levels was Moody Maze Marsh and Ukulele. I really like Ukulele. I really love a lot about Ukulele. That's my least favorite world in Ukulele.
Yeah, it's just not nice to look at. It's very dimly lit. It just can't really stand out.
Yeah, and that being said, Bad Magic Bayou, I think it's interesting. The top-down format makes it so you're at least looking at interesting things. They're able to keep it from falling into that just depressing environment, and they're also able to do something different with it. They kind of go into this whole sort of like Cajun, like New Orleans swamp kind of thing with like the voodoo tie-in, and like the bad magic is implied in that. But Bad Magic Bayou specifically is where Gruntilda not only had her first haunted mansion. Before there was Mad Monster Mansion, Dustin, she had a more modest estate here called Monster Manor.
Yeah, she was just kind of dabbling in haunted mansions a little bit.
Which, God, like, young Gruntilda had how many homes? And like, now, like, our generation, Dustin, we're never going to be homeowners. Not in the United States, at least.
Yeah, you got. It's almost like you gotta be magic to own a home.
We've got to find an island, and I guess kick out the little furry creatures who live there, and say this is my mountain now, and also I'm putting a monster house over there.
Yeah, form it to look like our faces.
It's never really delved into, but I imagine the Winky Bunyan family, they were born wealthy, like they have all of this generational wealth, and that like they just like blow it on like becoming like magic practitioners. Like, let's all become like wicked witches. Let's do it. Like they make a pact.
I mean, in Banjo-Kazooie, one of Gruntilda's hints can be that Gruntilda sleeps on a big pile of treasure.
Yeah.
And even if that's not the one you get, I think that could still imply, oh yeah, they are rich. Gruntilda has like a whole ton of treasure. Just because she doesn't sleep on it here, she could if she wanted to.
Yeah. And she's got an underwear factory, I don't know when she... Well, actually, we might have an answer to that in a little bit. So let me put a little pin in that. We're gonna take that pin out in just a bit. But Bad Magic Bayou, more importantly than Monster Manor, this is where Klungo creates Gruntilda's monster army, the Gruntlings,
right,
and what have you. And this is also where they train the monster army. So all of the monsters we see in this game, Banjo-Kazooie, and Banjo-Tooie, they went through the regiment here in Bad Magic Bayou.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that gives it a real purpose. I love when worlds and places like exist beyond just being a little place for you to platform around in.
Yeah. And I love when we get little backstories like that. Like, for me, in Banjo-Kazooie, like, the whole monster army thing felt vague and ill-defined. Like, it wasn't this thing I could really wrap my head around, like the Kremlin crew, right?
Right.
But Grunty's Revenge really shored that up for me. It's, okay, no, there is this system in place. Like, Klungo has this main lab here in Bad Magic Bayou where he, through an alchemy of mad science and black magic, creates these monsters, and then they're trained by, like, this drill sergeant Gruntling. It's great. It's like,
that's a fun character.
You've got these, you see these tires that they run through, like, you know, an army, like, training course. It's just that little bit of world building that just makes me buy into all of this nonsense.
Same here, Hyle. You know what? I think this Banjo-Kazooie series might be okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that if it wasn't for Grunty's Revenge.
It really just brings everything together.
I also have to point out, too, that Bad Magic Bayou is home to a Bigfoot variant. So you remember the Yetis from Hailfire Peaks?
Oh, Hyle, how could I forget?
So they also appear later on in Grunty's Revenge. But we've got a swamp variant called Bogfoot that appears here.
What a perfect name.
Perfect name, and also ties into real-world cryptozoology. Did you know that?
Oh, I knew.
You knew.
Oh, I knew, all right.
Because Jeff and I, we never shut up about the skunk ape. Now, what the skunk
Believe it or not, the skunk ape has been mentioned multiple times on me and Mitchell's podcast as well.
We're basically twins.
Basically, they are the exact same podcast.
We're basically just skunk ape brethren. And for those of you who aren't familiar with legendary apes who dwell in the hinterlands, the skunk ape is a variant, if you will, an evolutionary offshoot of your Sasquatch, aka Bigfoot.
Right.
Of
the Bigfoot Echo Fighter.
So basically, Bigfoots are in the temperate forest of North America. We've got Yetis. They are the snow variant found in places like the Himalayas. Skunk ape is in the more humid swamplands. They are just, they're basically Bigfoot of the swamp. But I really like that Rare was like, yeah, they're Bogfoots.
They're Bogfoots, they live here, and you're just gonna have to get used to it.
So, which also raises the question, Dustin.
Okay.
You know what question I'm gonna ask.
I don't.
You know. You know.
Oh, do I?
Oh, you know. In your heart, you know. Your brain might be drawing a blank.
Why don't you just refresh me? Get my brain up to speed.
I'll tickle it out of your heart into your brain space. So DK Vine's philosophy is that all apes in the Rare archipelago have the surname of Kong. Would this also ensnarl, bring in the mythical apes like your Bigfoots, your Bogfoots, your Sassy Squatch? And what is the relation between Sassy Squatch and Bigfoot? Are they Kongs, Dustin?
You know what? To me, they feel a little too divorced from being Kongs. Just looking at them, they look a little too far off for me to entertain the idea.
Are you saying that a Sasquatch is not an ape?
Sasquatch always struck me as kind of its own thing. It never really did strike me as a traditional ape, I guess. But I'm not an expert in the field.
Dustin, when I take you into the woods and we encounter a Sasquatch, you're going to have to explain this to them. And it's going to be awkward for me.
Yeah, no, here's the thing. If they tell me, if I go up to a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot, a skunk ape even, and they tell me, if they come up to me and say, yeah, we're part of the ape family, I would gladly be like, okay, you know what? Cool. I'm glad you cleared that up for me.
They can't speak English in real life. Are you an idiot?
I guess I am.
All right. It's all right.
I like to think they would be able to speak a little English.
They'd be able to sign for sure. Like they would know sign language. They'd be able to pick it up at least.
Right. I like the idea of if I'm going to meet a Sasquatch, I like to know that they can speak and rollerblade.
I'm sure you give a Sasquatch a pair of rollerblades, they would have the time of their life.
That's my favorite book. If you give a Sasquatch a pair of rollerblades.
The problem is finding a pair of rollerblades big enough for their big feet.
Oh my god. I would feel so bad if I brought them a pair of rollerblades and they just look at me like, dude, what the fuck are you thinking? You seen these feet?
Even worse is they're super excited and they go to put them on and they don't fit.
Yeah, I have to pretend like I haven't been staring at their feet this whole time.
You do love feet.
Oh, man. Now I feel awful.
Yeah, you should. Speaking of feeling awful, Spiller's Harbor.
What a good segue.
Yeah. So Spiller's Harbor is probably the world we talk about the most here at DK Vine, and not for any pleasant reason.
Oh boy!
You know where
we're all familiar. We're all familiar with this one.
You know where I'm going with this. I think everybody who has listened to a few episodes of the Kongversation probably knows where I'm going with this. We don't meet any other past versions of characters in Grunty's Revenge, but we do visit the location where Tip Top the Turtle was conceived. And I don't know what it is about Grunty's Revenge with all the hardcore sexual intercourse going on, but there was a lot going on in the Tip Top Suite, which is so Spiller's Harbor is a resort town, right?
Uh-huh.
It's a seaside resort town that has been heavily polluted. It's kind of like, you know, in the 70s before the EPA cleaned up the Great Lakes, you know, kind of that vibe. But
right.
All the same, there is a romantic getaway that Tip Top's parents presumably frequented, which is called the Tip Top Suite. And just like Ron Howard names all of his kids after where they were conceived, like Bryce Dallas Howard, presumably Tip Top's parents, because Tip Top was conceived in this hotel room, they named him Tip Top in honor of where they did the dirty deed.
Yeah, look at all this stuff on the carpet.
Yeah, so this is actually a discussion I had with Pete Hens. I just,
oh no,
I was like, so I want to talk to you about the semen stains. So Pete Hens,
and he knew exactly what you were talking about. He said, yes, the Tip Top Suite.
So Pete Hens was the one who designed the Tip Top Suite.
Okay,
he remembered, and I brought up the white stains, the white splotches. It's one thing to call them stains, but I think we need to be articulate here. They are splotches. It's not just white, right? So the carpet is kind of this salmon colored, this pinkish hue. And there are these off-white splotches just all across the carpet. Crusty. They give the connotation that there is this definite crunchiness to it if you walked across it. And
I hate that. I hate this podcast.
I brought this up to Mr. Hens, and I was like, my theory is that, and I explained what the theory was, that there was just a vigorous weekend, a long weekend even, of Tip Top's parents going at it and leaking. Stuff went everywhere indiscriminately, and he laughed and he was like, "Sure,
sure, why not?"
And in that moment, our interpretation of the Tip Top Suite did become canon. And word of God, what can I say?
Yeah, I mean, I love that it's canon. To be totally fair, if it's the 70s, is this really all that different from other suites and hotels?
Is it all that different from suites and hotels today, Dustin? That's the question you've got to be asking yourself.
That's true. Some things never change.
When's the last time you took a black light to where you were sleeping?
Oh man, PAX would have been a lot more uncomfortable if I did.
I like that this is the only Banjo-Kazooie game where Tip Top does not appear, but some shared DNA from his family does appear.
Yeah.
Who would have thought when this character debuted in Diddy Kong Racing that you're like, so long as in 6 years we get to see his daddy spunk.
I kind of had a hunch. The moment I saw him, I was like, you know what? I got a good feeling about this guy.
The long and winding road of the DKU has taken us to some magical places, but this might be my favorite, my friend.
It's a DK Vine historical landmark.
So I'm going to move on from the Tip Top Suite now, because I don't know
if we have to.
I don't know what more I could say about it that I already haven't shared. I can't wait till Destination DKU Spiller's Harbor, though. We should also point out that the rare cow, that hallmark of the rare handheld team, does not physically appear in Grunty's Revenge, but there is a etching of it in the sand to the west in Spiller's Harbor.
Yeah, someone liked the rare cow enough to draw it in the sand.
When I'm at the beach, I'm like, you know what I miss right now? Cows.
Oh, man, if only I could be more at home.
You don't see many cows at the beach, is what I'm saying.
That's true. You know what? I never thought about that before, but you're so right about that.
Now, Spiller's Harbor continues to be gross, because it is also home to a sentient family of poo monsters. That's right, poo monsters, called the Squits.
The Squits.
The Squits. Now, I love that Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge can have that thematic link back to Conker. Because, Conker, we met a big poo monster. Famous poo monster.
Right.
The most famous of the poo monsters. But poo monsters are a thing that can exist elsewhere in the Rare Archipelago. It's not just isolated to Willow Woods, the Panther Kingdom. There are poo monsters in 1978 Spiller's Harbor. And the mother Squit, by the way, you know what her name is?
Oh, I think I know.
Go ahead and say it.
Mrs. Squitter.
Mrs. Squitter, that's right. So, I love the thematic links to Conker vis-a-vis the Pooh. I love the thematic links to Donkey Kong using the Squitter name.
Vis-a-vis the Pooh.
Vis-a-vis the Pooh. I also love, so you have to help out Mrs. Squitter find her children. Her baby Poohs have scattered about Spiller's Harbor, and you've got to bring them back to Mommy Pooh. And
oh boy,
this is just rare. Like, this is the weird kind of humor they would engage in, because it just wasn't enough for them to say, haha, Pooh, similar to Conker's Bad Fur Day. Like, I know there's more to it. We have the big operatic Chris Marlowe song that everybody loves. I know. But I feel like Grunty's Revenge was a lot more subtle. Because the joke here is they made these adorable little children, but they're poo.
Yeah, they're never referred to as poo either. It's just for you to know.
Well, it was confirmed in scribes after the fact.
Right, I just mean in game.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they could be sludge monsters, right? Like
but we know they're not.
They skirt around the ESRB.
Right.
But no, they're poop, and so when I announce this episode of the Kongversation, I always have a social media preview image for what we're talking about that in some way relates to the topic at hand. And for this, I thought I would be really clever, and I used a screenshot of Octopus Banjo talking to one of the baby squits aboard a ship off Spiller's Harbor. And the baby poo is saying, "Bye, hug you soon."
That is clever.
I got so little engagement on these social media posts. And at first I thought, damn Elon Musk screwing up Twitter. But it turns out that, one, not many people care about Grunty's Revenge in the wider world. Two, I was probably being off-putting using this picture of a poo baby saying that he's going to hug you.
No, I mean, that's their fault if they don't recognize how great that is.
I mean,
anyone should be like, oh, a little poo thing, sign me up.
I agree in principle, but also I have to like look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, you have to be this way. Like, can't you just be more appealing to people? Maybe
things could be different.
Maybe I would be like Gruntilda's, like sleeping on a big pile of treasure with my underwear factory. If I was just a little bit more appealing, like her.
Yeah, like Gruntilda.
Yeah. So, yeah, Poo Monster is fantastic. Love when you see it. But also, we got to give a special shout out to another favorite denizen of Spiller's Harbor, Alfred P. Cock. Now, he's a peacock. This isn't like, dick humor. But maybe it is, because Alfred P. Cock is the owner of the Mr. Drippy ice cream truck.
Yeah, bad marketing on his part. He never put the two together.
So between, Mr. Drippy, run by Mr. Cock, the poop lumps, and the Tip Top Suite, Spiller's Harbor is, pound for pound, bar none, the most disgusting location in the TKU. It's just a rancid, like, hive of debauchery, Dustin.
Oh, no need to tell me, Hyle.
Like,
Please don't, it's disgusting.
The bodily fluid, the excrement. What the hell? I love it.
Yeah, what happened here?
Well, I mean, it's a statement on pollution in the 70s, before the ecological environmental movement really started cleaning up these places. Before, then we started politicizing environmentalism, and then we started polluting them again. But
yeah, you won't be seeing any little poo monster babies in this day and age.
I mean, I'm trying to sell people on environmentalism, Dustin. You're making it sound like it's a bad thing now.
Let's go back to the way things were, huh?
So Freezer asked in a live stream. I gotta check in with Freezer because she's with us all the way here, and I'm really,
hello.
like I said, she's the unofficial co-host of this episode. She says, "Do they make the ice cream by milking bovina?" It does raise some ethical questions about ice cream in the DKU, presuming it is made with dairy. And this was the 70s, so I don't think they had like almond ice cream, oat milk ice cream, or what have you. I can't do oat milk ice cream, Dustin. It makes me have some little squits, if you know what I mean.
Ooh, I think I get what you mean.
It's because the oil content in oat milk doesn't agree with me. Almond ice cream, almond milk ice cream, just fine. I can process that just fine. But oat milk ice cream, it's like I'm eating dairy. It's just not an acceptable solution for my intestines. But
Right.
in 1978, they didn't really have that, so I would imagine it'd be dairy. But then, yeah, if you have like sentient cows who can talk to you, it's like, yep, go ahead and milk me. I'm all for it. Let's get it done.
Yeah, maybe it's a job for them.
Or maybe they market it themselves, like people want my goods. I'm gonna crank it out and bottle it, and they can make ice cream with it if they want.
You know what? That's smart.
We talked a little bit about how, like, in Conquer, they have the googly-eyed cheese, so they just raise it like a livestock. I want to see more of the inner workings of the more complicated politics of the DKU, like milk from talking cows. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, you could get a whole game out of that. I want to play that.
Let's just have a novel. Like, it doesn't even have to be a game. Like, let's get Chris Alcock to write the novel for this.
Yeah, you know what? Finally put these questions to bed. That really should be Rare's number one priority. No more of these Sea of Thieves books.
We've had.
I want to read about.
Yeah.
What? How do you get milk here?
We've had Sea of Thieves, Athena's Fortune. We've had Sea of Thieves, Heart of Fire. Let's have a completely different book, Bovina's Sweet Treats. A Banjo-Kazooie novel.
You can have her on the cover looking seductive at the viewer. Or like holding one of her fingers up to her mouth saying it's a secret.
And no, she's got one finger up on her mouth, but then on the other side of her mouth she's got like a fudge bar or something, like a what yeah.
Perfect. So, I'm on board already.
So Freezing Furnace is the last world. It is similar to Hailfire Peaks. Topside, it's snowy, but then you go down into the underground, and it's kind of this industrial cauldron, a furnace, if you will.
Yeah.
And what's
it's basically like if you took Hailfire Peaks and mashed it together with Grunty Industries.
Well, literally in this case, because the underground furnace area is called Grunty Industries.
Yep, there it is, right there in the text.
Now, I think people would like confuse this with the physical location in Banjo-Tooie. I don't think that's the implication here. I think this is where Grunty Industries got its start in 1978.
Like this was the first Grunty Industries before they expanded.
This is where it incorporated. This is before they built the big factory on the Isle of Hags. This little like hellscape underneath the snow is where Grunty Industries first got its start. Just like Apple computers started in a garage. Grunty Industries started in a lava pit underneath the snow.
Humble beginnings.
Especially for an underwear factory, am I right? Like,
yeah, let's make our underwear factory in the depths of hell, and then just expand from there. Like,
if I'm starting an underwear factory, my inclination would be, well, I gotta get a sewing machine, I guess. Some fabric.
No, Gruntilda said, let's put this in an inferno.
Right, like Gruntilda just goes for it. That's what I do admire that about her. Like, she doesn't take any half measures.
Yeah, that's true. Her priorities are a little out of whack, but she gets there eventually.
It's like, well, wouldn't this just burn the underwear? It's like, don't worry about it. Like,
yeah, who cares?
We're gonna have so much geothermal energy powering it that, you know, we're gonna make up for the loss of product in just the energy savings.
You know what? You gotta admire her for it.
I do like the little touches, though, that this game does provide. Like, oh, here's Grunty Industries 22 years before you know, like, what it becomes. Here is, like, before Mad Monster Mansion, we got the Monster Manor. Just little stuff like that shows that this world is not stagnant. It is ever evolving, and we're getting little snapshots in time. Like
little baby versions.
Yeah, like opposite ends of the timeline, and then we can just fill in the blanks. Rare really does excel at this form of world building where they show rather than tell.
Yeah, and then just let you build your own thoughts off of that.
Exactly. I mean, that's what DK Vine has kind of built its empire on, is just saying, hey, Kremling Temple's there. Donkey Kong Land establishes Kremlantis. There's a Northern Kremisphere. Let's put all these pieces together. That makes sense.
Hyle, correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah.
Was there or was there not concept art of a little baby Boggy that they never ended up putting into this? I would assume he would be in this level. I remember seeing something kind of like Blubber earlier. I think they had plans for Boggy. I don't know if it's here or somewhere else in the game, that just didn't end up making it.
That would make sense, and I'm sure there is concept art. I'm sure they've kicked around so many ideas, but, back when all this concept art was coming off, Twitter and just the various people who worked on the game sharing ideas, I think Boggy, was probably in the cards, and they didn't implement them for whatever reason. Maybe there just wasn't time, or there just wasn't a good fit for him in the same way that Blubber facilitated that mini game.
Well, let me read to you what it says on the Banjo-Kazooie wiki here.
Not always accurate, the Banjo-Kazooie wiki, by the way. But,
right. Yeah. But I do remember seeing this, so I think in this case it's right. In Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge, Boggy was planned to appear in the cut world Freezing Fjord, which was eventually merged together with another cut world Fiery Furnace to become Freezing Furnace in the final game. Yeah. Unused sprites depict him riding a sled can also be found in the game's files.
What was he a baby? Was he young?
I might have just made that part up.
Because it's weird, because I wouldn't think Boggy would be that much older than Banjo.
Yeah.
And if you're time traveling to 1978, I mean, I don't know.
Oh, I'm looking at it right now. He does look like a little kid, like Blubber. He's like a little kid Boggy.
Okay.
He's cute. They should have kept that.
Then again, when we're talking about deviants, the perverts of the Banjo-Kazooie series, maybe after Spiller's Harbor, they're like, all right, we don't need to see, like, how Boggy, like, perverted himself into the guy who just freely masturbates in his family den.
Yeah, it would just make you sad seeing how little innocent Boggy and just knowing that things go so horribly wrong. Yeah,
I don't think Boggy is ever somebody we need to, like, go back in time and see the pure version of. He's just a scumbag. Let's just let it lie.
Yeah, just just know him how he is now.
It's interesting that they mashed up the two worlds like that. I mean, it's something like the handheld teams of Rare just did, like Donkey Kong Land 2. Oh, we somehow don't have the space for Crocodile Cauldron and Creme Key. Let's do Creme Cauldron. Like, just mash them up. Just throw them together.
Yeah, they go so well together.
But the whole, like, weird dichotomy thing is something Rare like to do. So, and like I said, this kind of works as sort of a piece with Hailfire Peaks in its own way.
Yeah. And I don't think anything's lost by merging them together. We had an ice level already. We already had Hailfire Peaks in Tui by this point. So I don't know. I don't think it matters that they mashed the ice and fire levels together again.
And again, like, they do something different with the fire section, where it's not just lava side, it's Grunty Industries, like, 1.0. So
exactly.
So yeah, like, they make, like, lemonade out of lemons, right? Except I don't like lemonade all that much, so
I make lemonade out of anything I've previously drank.
That's disgusting, Dustin. On this podcast, that's for all ages.
Well, we were talking about Sasquatch earlier, so.
Oh, that's right. It's Sasquatch who loves the pee. So for those who don't know, because this has come up on our streams recently, speaking of streams,
Woo!
there is a horrifying beef jerky commercial that's airing.
I love just that alone. There's a horrifying beef jerky commercial.
Yeah, here in the States, they have beef jerky commercials for the different beef jerky brands. You know, your Slim Jims with your Macho Men, and your Jack Links with your Sasquatch as your mascot. And Jack Links, the beef jerky brand, used to have this ad campaign called Messin' with Sasquatch, where it showed bullies tormenting the poor, gentle wild man of the forest. And you always felt bad for them. And like, why would you do this? I'm never going to eat this beef jerky. You know, I don't eat beef jerky, but you know, like if I did eat beef jerky, I would avoid this because I want to befriend Sasquatch. I don't want to mess with him.
Yeah, I don't want this jerky to turn me into a Sasquatch bully.
But maybe they thought better of it, and they were like, well, we want to keep the Sasquatch brand name because it's part of our corporate identity, but we don't want to mess with him anymore. How can we convey the Sasquatch within? And so now in their commercials, they have somebody enjoying a little snippet, a little morsel of the beef jerky, and then Sasquatch like grows out of them. It's like unleash your wild side. That's what they say now. And like become the Sasquatch that lives within you. And so this one commercial that Jeff first pointed out to us and made us watch, because Jeff, you know, he watches the college football games and he sees stuff like this and then he shares with us. So there's this commercial of this man at this urinal, and whenever I'm at a urinal, I'm not eating anything. My inclination is I'm going to do my business. I'm going to get out of here.
Yeah, keep food and pee time separate.
Exactly. I always say that, you know, what comes out of me doesn't need to be coming out of me when something's going into me. It's just too complicated.
Exactly.
It gets messy. But
I only have 2 hands.
But I guess this person is trying to life hack, and they're like, you know, if I can eat my beef jerky while I'm urinating, think of all the things I'll have time for.
Yeah, that would free up so much time.
I'll be sleeping on a big pile of treasure in no time. So anyway, eats the beef jerky at the urinal. What do you know? Sasquatch grows out of his back and also starts urinating. And of course, Sasquatch, being a large, hairy primate of a mythical stature, can apparently urinate with the speed, force, and ferocity of a fire hose, and pees in the opposite direction, pees out of this individual's back, essentially, and destroys the opposite urinal with the force of his urine. And I described this to you, not that it has any direct relation to Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge, only in that we've talked about Sasquatch so many times. And I feel like this commercial is going to keep coming up throughout the football season here at DK Vine, the American football season here at DK Vine, because Jeff's going to keep bringing it up, and then I'm going to keep bringing it up, and you're just going to need to know what it is. So I'm telling you now. So you not only know what it is, but so you know to avert your eyes should you bear witness to this on your own TV boxes. Be warned. This exists. It's in the wild, and somehow it's airing. And it shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, that Sasquatch is pretty based.
What? They're going to start advertising on our Twitch channel.
They're going to be like, oh, this is the perfect spot for it. That would be very good. Then everyone would know.
So we have a call, but spoiler alert, it's Freezer. So we're gonna play Freezer's call, hear what she has to say, respond to it, and we're gonna start wrapping this up. And we're going to get to the heart of why Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge still matters. And I know, contemporary critics at the time didn't think it mattered back then. We're going to tell you why they're wrong.
Yeah.
Hey, Hyle and Dustin, this is Freezer. I'll cut to the chase and just say I love Grunty's Revenge. I love it more than most people. It is an unhealthy obsession, but it's just how I feel. Now, a lot of the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance content from Rare and the DKU as a whole, I just wasn't really aware of until I discovered DK Vine like 6 or 7 years ago. That most of these games didn't really get big marketing pushes, and even the few I was slightly aware of, like this Game Boy Advance Banjo game, I dismissed it as a kid because I thought it would just be a kind of shallow experience that couldn't possibly live up to the N64 game. Now, thanks to you, Hyle, Grunty's Revenge is my second favorite game in the series, right behind Tooie and still ahead of Kazooie. I'm sure that's not something you hear very often. But this game is so short and simple, and it's easy to replay on a whim. It's the kind of game that you play when you've got like 90 minutes of free time, and you think, why not replay it? I can beat my best time, surely. All the transformations are unique, and we have no filler here. And Mouse Banjo might be the cutest thing in the series. And we have Robot Grunty, which is my favorite version of her. She's still threatening, but this is a version of her that's been defeated by the bear and bird, so she still wants revenge. But she also rhymes, you know? This is like an amalgamation of all the different versions of Grunty. And I kind of love it. You know, this is a best of both worlds situation. I'm kind of rambling, but I love this game, and because of you, Hyle, I discovered all these games that I love, or at least enjoy a bit, like Pocket Tales. But, best of all, Grunty's Revenge was the first game I played with the rare cow in it, and it led me to discover this thing, and it created another unhealthy obsession for me. Make the rare cow DKU. We all know Perfect Dark and the Mickey Mouse games are DKU, even if you won't accept them, Hyle. Do it. Do it for me. Do it for Steve, and whoever else cares. Please.
Thank you for the call, Freezer. Just you and Steve, that's it. You're the only ones who care about the rare cow. I mean, I care about the rare cow to an extent, but the unhealthy obsession, we all have our unhealthy fixations. It might not even be unhealthy because, you know, if it brings you joy and you're not hurting anybody, is it really unhealthy? But we all have our fixations and our like areas of expertise. For me, it's Royston more than the rare cow. Royston does appear in Grunty's Revenge, by the way. He appears on the barbecue, on the grill at the beginning and end of the game. In fact, Grunty's Revenge starts off with like them basically being like, I guess we finally have to clean off that barbecue. It's been 2 months.
It's about time. 2 months is about as long as I can stand having this fish on there.
Royston surviving in the grilled juices, the rainwater that pools in there, like barely hanging on. But, yeah, like, no. Was it Mickey Speedway USA? What is the Game Boy Color
Mickey's
one?
Racing Adventure. I had that one as a kid.
You had that one?
I didn't even know it was rare when I got it at first. It was before I really, like, thought of Rare as, like, a studio and as a brand.
Yeah.
So I just thought of it as, like, a Mickey Mouse game. I didn't even think, oh, these are the same people. This is the same studio who makes all those other games I like.
I mean, that is, like, I think the one you can make the case for, because it's a physical cow that appears in it.
Right.
Which similar to the physical cow that appeared in Conker's Pocket Tales. But that's a whole other, like, tribunal episode waiting to happen. So we're not going to sully the good name of why Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge still matters by talking about the Mickey Mouse game from the Game Boy Color.
Yeah. Sorry, Freezer.
Yeah.
Just know that I played it. I think I enjoyed it. It was basically just Mickey Mouse RC Pro-Am.
Yeah. Yeah, like, you don't like kart racers on the Game Boy Advance, but you didn't say anything about kart racers on the Game Boy Color.
Yeah, that's where they really thrived.
But seriously, Freezer, thank you. I know you say, like, I got you into these games, but thank you for your enthusiasm. for making your videos about them. It has been a delight to see. It's just wonderful to see stuff I love through somebody else's eyes and perspective, which doesn't happen often nowadays. Like, a lot of this is pretty well-worn territory, and generally, like, if somebody really, really likes this, I bring them into the staff, and so it's just been really cool to see somebody with their own channel get enthused by them, and thank you for spreading the word and advocating for them as well.
Yeah, I love it.
Yep. So, as I alluded to, Dustin, Grunty's Revenge got some pretty tepid reviews when it first came out. This was not this widely regarded masterpiece that we're making it out to be here on this episode. A lot of Banjo-Kazooie fans didn't like it. And one of the common complaints that I heard around the time on the DK Vine forum was, it's just not enough like Banjo-Kazooie. It doesn't feel like the N64 game. Which...
I mean, obviously.
Yeah, like, I feel like it's a silly complaint. Like,
yeah, what were you expecting? A 3D, big 3D platformer?
Like, even in 2003, like I realized 2003 was like basically a generation removed from 1995, or even earlier than that with like the Super Mario Land games. But I was weaned on the concept of these like smaller handheld versions of the bigger console games. It was part of my game education. It was part, like, my tapestry of knowledge of how these things worked. So I was expecting Grunty's Revenge to be, you know, not as magnificent, not as grand, not as robust as Banjo-Kazooie or Tooie. I was not expecting it to get as close as it did, though.
Yeah. Same, totally. Like, they do a great job.
Grunty's Revenge exceeded my expectations. So I always like raise my eyebrows, like, what are you expecting? Like, maybe if you're,
it's the Game Boy Advance.
Maybe if you're a wee baby or younger and you never knew a world where handheld titles at the very least weren't Nintendo DS quality, right? Like,
yeah.
Like maybe I could understand you coming back to this and being like, but if you were like of this era, I don't get it. I don't get that criticism, but whatever. Critics, like professional game critics who in 2003 were high on their anti-rare supply. Like, this was the beginning of that dark era where they just hated everything Rare did.
Right.
Because it was rare, because either they, like, found fault with them for leaving Nintendo, or it was just in vogue. They were all, like, Generation Xers who didn't grow up with Donkey Kong Country, and therefore didn't have the emotional attachment to the studio, and, you know, basically were crafting this alternate narrative than the ones we lived with in the 90s. But too many of them didn't like this game, and it never sat right with me. Like, at the most, they said it was okay, it was adequate, but it was too short and too easy. And Freezer alluded to that as well, but Freezer said it was a positive, right? And
yeah,
like,
I think I agree with that. It is short, too. It is easy, but I mean, it's a little bite-sized Banjo game.
Yeah, I think providing enough of a challenge without being seriously brutal isn't a bad thing. Like, yeah. Like that's not a detriment to me for a game. Is it enjoyable? Should be the first priority. Like, can I have a good time with this, even if, like, I'm not sweating buckets trying to get past a particular part? And I think, like, yeah, like, Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge is immensely enjoyable.
Yeah, totally.
It's also a game that's able to pack in so much character, charm, and if you are a serious Banjo-Kazooie or DKU fan, hardcore lore and world-enriching storytelling. It's got that, like, in nearly every corner, just bristling with just amazing attention to detail. That
totally.
I think, like, the criteria in which people judge games to this day, but especially like if it's not a triple A title, like there are people who they only go for like, oh, is it like Starfield, right? Like, or what's the game called? Is that what it's called? I forget.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one. Okay, yeah. I was like, did I get that wrong? That's how little I care. If it's not like the big like multi-million-dollar extravaganza, they don't have time for it, right? Like the kind that just like eats people up alive and spits them out. I am, especially in recent years, I've really like come to appreciate the indie game industry just because that's kind of filling the hole that has been left behind by the absence of games like Grunty's Revenge.
Yeah, I totally agree. Those were some of my favorite things to see when I went to PAX West. Just all these little creative games that just get to thrive in this little area. It's fun seeing just you can get a lot of weird ideas with these kinds of games. Ideas that big studios might not, want to throw millions and millions of dollars at. I actually wish Rare put out more after their portable team kind of dissolved. Just nothing. Like I thought we could have gotten more like Jetpack Refueled. It sucks that there just aren't a lot of smaller little games coming from Rare.
I agree. This is what I really love about this era of Rare is you not only have the console games, but you also have the handheld team just putting out content. And yeah, it would be smaller games, like more bite-sized games you would finish quicker, probably, but they were mostly like exceptional releases. They were so much fun. And if you are a fan of the property in which they're a part of, you just love to have that content, right? It was just world building, and it also kept the torch alive for things like Banjo-Kazooie. Like between Tooie and Nuts and Bolts, 8 years? So yeah, like Banjo-Kazooie, like in that interim, was Grunty's Revenge. It was Banjo Pilot. It was these games. Like this meant so much to me during that decade. And like you said, I miss this type of game more than ever. Just lower budget, still from like a major studio. But it's like indulges in like brevity as the soul of wit, right? Like, yeah, it's not this huge expansive game that might take you 300 hours or whatever with DLC later on. But you can pick it up, you can play it, you can beat it, you can enjoy it, you can pick it up again. And it's just a fun little bite-sized package that leaves you satisfied and happy that you played it. So, yeah, I think it's unfortunate that Grunty's Revenge has only ever been referenced, in the other Grunty's Revenges, like Infusio's Grunty's Revenge Mobile Edition, and Grunty's Revenge Missions, and Banjo Pilot. Like, Nuts and Bolts never bothered to acknowledge any of its brilliance. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate didn't bring in the Alfred P. Cox spirit. What the hell, Sakurai? I thought you were on our side.
Yeah, come on, man. Yeah, Nuts and Bolts actually, like, in that intro at the beginning, it brings up Kazooie and Tooie. No Grunty's Revenge even mentioned.
Which is okay. Like, I feel like in this modern era of wiki-brained fan culture, there is this notion that anytime something is not explicitly mentioned, that must mean it's not canon. Right? Like people, like, and this isn't an indictment against, like, current fans or even fans who are really all about, like, studying wikis or whatever. But I do think there is this, like, notion that the studio or corporate entity has to hold your hand or else it just doesn't matter. And if it's not mentioned, that must mean it's decanonized. And I'm just like, oh, get over it. Like, of course Grunty's Revenge is canon. Just fill in the blanks if they don't bring it up. Like, oh, it doesn't come up in Nuts and Bolts? Well, that's just because it doesn't come up in Nuts and Bolts. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. Like, oh, the Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline book that's coming out isn't mentioning Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Well, then just fill in the blanks in your own head. You can say Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. happened. It doesn't matter. Like, use your brain. That's part of the fun of being a fan, is making all these connections.
It's not like you see... It's not like you see every second, every minute of these characters' lives. It's not like, oh, I guess last Tuesday was not canon because they didn't make it into a game.
Right. And, like, as far as Grunty's Revenge impact, as far as its legacy goes, I would say it still matters because sometimes a game doesn't have to leave this huge, enormous sales record or revolutionize the genre to have an impact. I think that's very binary thinking.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to transcend or be remembered by the general public all that much. Sometimes it just has to mean quite a bit to the people it's being made for. And I think few games do that quite as well as Grunty's Revenge.
Beautiful. I couldn't have said it better myself, Hyle.
There are games that are my favorite games, and there are games that, while not ranked as high on my personal list, ensure that my fandom would endure. Like Donkey Kong Country 2, it's my favorite game of all time. I say it time and time again. But I would not be as primed as I was for Donkey Kong Country 2 if it hadn't been for Donkey Kong Land, fleshing out that world, getting me excited about it continuing, just giving me this education in Donkey Kong, like, Obscura, and really getting me hyped for what comes next. Donkey Kong Land did that, and it made me ready for DKC 2 in a way that just going from the first Donkey Kong Country to the second Donkey Kong Country wouldn't have done.
Yeah.
I adore Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. It's one of my top 10 favorite games of all time. But I don't think it would mean nearly as much to me if the original Yooka-Laylee hadn't laid that groundwork with the characters. Even if I don't like the original Yooka-Laylee as much as Impossible Lair would not mean nearly as much to me if it wasn't for that first game. Same thing, Conker's Pocket Tales to Bad Fur Day, right?
Right.
The Banjo-Kazooie series is known mostly for those first two 3D platformers on the N64 and the controversy around Nuts and Bolts. But
right.
It wouldn't be nearly as interesting if, like Donkey Kong Land before it, Grunty's Revenge hadn't taken us deeper into the world, its history, and its residents.
Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't be as into Banjo-Kazooie today if we didn't have that big chicken.
Yeah, or taking us deeper into the seedy underbelly of the cum-stained fabric of the Tip-Top Suite.
Oh, God.
Hey, Dustin. I've got another idea for a shirt.
This has been a File 2 production.
I almost wet my little pants.